redistribution mechanism is a bit like a logic similar to reduction, where essentially it uses the troves on liquidity to liquidate the trove that needs to be liquidated. And the way it works is this time it uses the most collateralized trove, because essentially you're making them accrue debt, but at unfavorable condition. So essentially, it's like friends. You play poker with your friends, and you have this guy who got 2 or 3 reform and go for another all-in and lose it. You're like, okay, we're gonna bail him out, So we just buy your debt and we get your collateral, kind of situation.
So, Liquity. I got excited about Liquity. Well, I mean, it's been interesting to me for a while, but honestly, I got especially excited about it when it got such a high rating on Blue Chip recently. I'm super excited about Blue Chip, the stablecoin rating agency, and I was like, damn, that's a really good rating. Like, why is that? And so I asked the Blue Chip team a little bit about it, and Vidya, who's the ratings director, said a bunch of things, and I was like, whoa, there's a bunch of mechanisms there that I don't understand, some sort of like extra, tokens in some safety pool or something. I just didn't understand what it was, and I was like, okay, that sounds super fascinating. I'll bet that would be cool to learn about, and I'll bet others would want to learn about it too. So that was my impetus for inviting you guys to come have this conversation. Thank you for doing so. Why don't I just start with like my very, very basic understanding of like what kind of stablecoin it even is. And then, and hopefully that will be like a little bit of context for someone who's watching this video starting really from zero. And then from there, we'll have you guys kind of just start to explain to me more about it. And we'll ask questions from there. Sound good?
Sound good.
Okay. So my understanding is that Liquity, or LUSD, is that you just call it LUSD?
Yeah.
It's an over-collateralized crypto-backed stablecoin where, I think the most popular example of such a stablecoin has been DAI. But I think that wasn't actually the first one. I think maybe like BitUSD was kind of the first big attempt of that type. Where for anyone who doesn't know, the way that this basically works is with what it was originally called a collateralized debt position. So if you want to mint the stablecoin, you show up to the smart contract with some collateral, some crypto asset of whatever type. You deposit it, and then you can borrow, some fraction of that value in the stablecoin. Say it's half or something. And so you have, this much of some volatile crypto asset backing this much of the stablecoin now, or backing. It's a little bit unclear to say whether it's backing or not, but the value is there to end up sort of solidifying the value of the stablecoin that's been borrowed. And obviously, if the value of this crypto asset goes down to the point where it's worth less than the outstanding stablecoin, you'd be under collateralized, and that would be a problem. And so all of these systems have something in place where if that value starts to drop, at a certain point, the system itself says, okay, we need to pull some of these stablecoins out of circulation and reduce that outstanding supply to make sure that the collateral we have left is sufficient. And when people talk about liquidations, in the case of a CDP stablecoin, that's what they mean. It's basically, some of this collateral gets liquidated or basically sold for the stablecoins to like buy stablecoins out of circulation to make sure that you always have enough backing to back the stablecoin. So that's the basic idea of a CDP-based stablecoin design, and LUSD sort of falls into that overall category. That's pretty much as I know about Liquity and LUSD. So in terms of other differences between LUSD and DAI or any other crypto-backed stablecoin, I don't really understand what they are. So how about we kind of start with that basic idea and then tell me what is LUSD given that basic background?
Yeah, cool. I mean, I think you outlined well how technically it works, but I would like to go even one step further back.
Okay.
I mean, what are people using it for?
Okay.
And to give an example, so we have, for example, recently Marcus, that's a community or a user in Latam. He wanted to buy a car. He had crypto, but he wanted to buy a car. He went to his bank and ask for a loan to buy the car. And I think right now in Latam, I don't know, at least 7, 8, or 12%, you need to pay. It takes 4 days. You pay the 10% ongoing. So that was his situation. And then what he did, he researched. He did that on Twitter. So he looked at Maker. Yes, Maker is such an example and other examples. And he then decided to go for Liquity. And we can talk about why or what's the difference then to Maker. But then what he did, as you said correctly, he deposited his collateral, took out a loan. He paid 0.5% one-off on the whole loan compared to 10%. He got the LUSD.
And it's a fixed rate loan or variable?
No interest. It's a one-off fee. It's not an interest rate.
Oh, wow.
That makes it really unique.
Oh,
yeah?
so you pay a
the
one-off fee,
longer you
no
have
interest
the loan, the cheaper it gets.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, that was very compelling to him,
Wild.
So 0.5% instead of 10, he got LUSD, let's say 20,000 LUSD, and he put 50,000 in ETH as collateral. Then he swapped that in DeFi, probably to USDC, USDT, off-ramped it, and got the cash and bought the car. And the loan, he had it in 10 minutes, and the next day he had the cash for the car. Of course, if you off-ramp and so on, you have some more fees, but probably he has now the loan with 2% fee and not an ongoing interest cost. So that's just an example how people use it. So Liquity has 2 use cases. Actually the borrowing is the main use case for a car. Eric Voorhees used it for his mortgage, so that's cool too. So people use it for that. And once people borrow, they get the stablecoin. So kind of that's like the other side. And then we have the stablecoin in circulation, which has also interesting properties.
Okay.
But maybe throwing that in, that people understand a bit where, and I think that's a nice case about Liquity, where it touches the real life of people and impacts them.
That's really interesting. You said use it for a mortgage, but you can't use the house as collateral in Liquity.
No. You would use the crypto. And of course, you need some wealth in crypto.
Yeah.
But if you want to keep it, why would people do that? Because they don't want to sell the ETH now, because they think, hey, it's a much better deal to keep the ETH and it maybe pay down even my student debt or my house and take out the loan against it.
Okay. And so if you did that, let's say with the car, so you deposit ETH, you borrow LUSD, swap it for fiat, buy a car, what risk are you taking? I guess it's like if your ETH goes down in value enough, then you could get liquidated, and to avoid that, you might have to sell your car in order to repay your loan to not get liquidated.
Or have other source of stable in crypto you could use to repay some debt if needed, or other ETH somewhere. Maybe you have ETH just farming in a Yearn vault or something, and you can add them to your collateral if needed. But essentially you need some kind of buffer, especially if you're in a year-long perspective. There might be a situation where you need to recollateralize, essentially, one way or another.
Right. So it's like if you have enough excess capital, then this is just an amazing deal.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you're riding on the line, you don't have extra capital, then it's like, well, that traditional loan where I'm paying a high interest rate, at least I'm not worried about being liquidated. So I feel like that's kind of the trade-off. Is that the right way
the main trade-off is you need some wealth in crypto. We're not there where we can give under-collateralized loans to people. I think that's the big barrier, where there we are still in our bubble.
And there's a lot of people with wealth in crypto. There's a lot of people with wealth in crypto. So.
Yeah, and maybe in countries where it's difficult or kind of just they're happy they can do that. And the benefit from the appreciation of the crypto, it's escaping also their currency. And liquidation, what's the worst thing that can happen? If the loan gets liquidated, he still keeps his loan or his car. But he gets a haircut of 10% and he loses his ETH, his exposure to ETH, which is not nice, but the world doesn't go under it.
Right.
So people usually want to repay, but it's not kind of, you lose everything if you get liquidated.
Yeah. Okay, and so how is it that Liquity is able to offer this fixed rate mechanism rather than ongoing interest? I guess, is the protocol just giving up a lot of revenue relative to DAI by doing that, or I hadn't heard of that before.
I guess it's a long story, actually. So, yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive, but for me, it stems from the consequences made when it comes to the price stabilization mechanism harnessed for LUSD. So, to kind of take a sidestep and then we go to LUSD. But, for instance, on CRV USD right now, a newer stablecoin, the interest rate is used directly as a way to essentially regulate the supply. So, simple story, but essentially when there is too much CRV USD in circulation, interest rate rises, and that kind of drives existing borrowers to repay, and it kind of deter future borrowers that were considering it, leading to, a contraction of the CRV USD supply. So essentially those interest rates can be used as way to regulate supply. But for LUSD and Liquity, that's exactly what we're not doing. So the interest rate is kind of completely kept out on how do you keep the stable at peg of this question. And I guess this is what enables it to have it at initiation fee. Then it's a question of, okay, so how do you stabilize without the interest rate? And then we get into
Wait, I didn't quite catch that. Could you say that one more time of what that main difference is?
So yeah, so I just mean at first glance, adjusting an interest rate seems like the easiest way to regulate the supply of a stable because it gives you a good ceiling mechanism. Essentially, you have too much of your stable in circulation. You raise interest rate and you keep raising it until eventually people will stop minting. They don't like paying 20% to borrow. So that's pretty efficient. And that works quite well to regulate, but this is not the angle that is harnessed at Liquity, because essentially the stability is achieved by other mechanism. So we have the redemption to ensure the ceiling and the floor, and then the ceiling is more because of the LTV of the system. So essentially the way LUSD reaches its stability doesn't require a constant tinkering of the interest rate, which allows the protocol to have this fee structure. I would say it's also the fee structure has a bias, as we were saying, towards the long term. So it's because it's a one-time fee on a borrowing operation. Exactly as Micheal was saying, essentially, the longer you keep the loan, the more you are saving compared to really other platforms where you will have an interest rate. And this also kind of aligns with the technical needs of the protocol, which is, to put it simply, it's easier to stabilize a system where people are borrowing for years than a system where people are borrowing for minutes. So it's good to have those long, big troughs that are here for months at a time. Gives you an ample baseline of LUSD supply and extra collateral in the system to kind of stomach the market movement.
Okay. But let's go to the question. I think we are almost already too much in the weeds. I really like the question. It's a mind-blowing concept. We don't know it in traditional finance. And I think that's the beauty. Liquity is a great use case to see what the technology can offer for great services which you don't find in traditional finance. And if you take a step back, why is it possible? It's possible because Liquity and also Maker, it's not a lending market. There's not a lender that you need to pay the interest. You usually pay an interest because somebody's giving you the money. Right. So in Liquity prints its own LUSD. Can do that because it's always backed. But it's like a bit the Federal Reserve. Right. It can print it. It has no capital cost. And what Liquity does compared to others, it gives all the benefits to the user. Yes, if there would be an interest rate which is bigger, it could extract more money to the stakeholder. But it wanted to have this really compelling offering and using the power of blockchain that you can build like a Fed, but even better as the Fed because the collateral is always there. You see it in real time that it's back. That gives the LUSD the value. If you would just print LUSD and have no tie to the collateral and the guarantee that you could get, it would have no value. So in that sense, it's much better than the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve is not backed by gold or anything, and it's certainly not over collateralized. Right. So this mechanism, this trust that you can now encode enables that we say we have only this one-off fee because we have no capital cost, which we need to pay a lender that gives you the money. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so can you explain to me then how the peg mechanism works to the upside and to the downside for LUSD?
Sure. So it is fully backed by ETH and redeemable because I think we
Okay.
kind of had some hesitation
Okay.
in the intro on this.
And so ETH is the only collateral
Yeah,
option in
absolutely.
Liquity. Okay.
It's the only way to mint LUSD is to supply a proportionate amount of ETH to the contract, and that's
Cool.
only ever way you would bring LUSD in existence. The way it works, I guess the more interesting one is especially the ceiling, because that's its hardest with stable coins is keeping them, making sure they retain value essentially. And so for LUSD, the way it works is simply that you can redeem the stablecoin for $1 worth of Ether through the system. It has some fees, so it's not immediately profitable to do it at LUSD equal $1. So the idea is accounting for the fee, it will become a profitable operation slightly below $1. And then it creates this pressure where if you have available capital on the market and you see, let's say, LUSD at 99 cents, then you can simply buy it, redeem it for the ETH, so destroy it and get the underlying ETH. Yep. And so in the process, you're creating buying pressure and burning tokens, so you're quickly pushing it back to peg.
And at what price does that become profitable?
So it's not based on any price trigger or anything. It's just the system considers, will always give you $1 worth of ETH for USD. And then there are some fees to account for, 0.5% base fee. So you need to account for all of that against the current market price of LUSD. So roughly it starts becoming interesting when LUSD is trading around 0.99.5 or something like that. Yeah.
Because there's a 0.5% fee. Why is there a fee?
Because essentially this system is useful to give a concrete backing to LUSD, to make it redeemable for ETH is a very valuable property, but it's also it's essentially an outflow of collateral capital from the system. So it's not the kind of behavior you want to incentivize or favor too much. The base flow to exchange LUSD to ETH is still to go through an AMM. This is really more of a secondary backup flow almost, It's more in the perspective of having this exist, ensuring the ceiling makes the liquidity much easier to build on top. Because, now you have a guarantee for your liquidity providers that they know that it won't go below this price because at this point you can simply redeem it for the value, so it will be quickly arbitrage. So it essentially, sorry if it's too technical, it tightened the range at which a stable is trading, making the liquidity endeavors much more effective.
That makes sense, and I'm interested in the technical details, so we do have to go there sometimes.
Okay.
But it just seems like if that fee were like 10 basis points instead of 50, then you would be able to maintain a tighter peg, and that might make the stablecoin more valuable to people who wanted something that would be stable against the dollar. Or does that not turn out to be a problem? Are people fine with it?
Yeah, because it's not exactly this doesn't apply the peg per se. It's more like pressure to push it towards the peg, I guess, Then the tightness of the peg will come with other mechanism kind of on top of that. I think looking for super tight peg with the redemption, the risk you run into is, even if it works, let's say people are redeeming a lot and keeping your stable perfectly at peg because it's super narrow margin, then you have a problem, which is your system is leaking value on a frequent basis because you have those people redeeming every day, and essentially they burn debt every time they redeem. So they remove collateral from your system and they burn debt, which is too net loss for you.
Let's talk about those pieces. So if I show up and I'm like, all right, here's $1 million LUSD, I want $1 million worth of ETH, or $1 million minus 0.5%. Does it take that from all of the, are they called troves?
Yes.
All of the trove holders pro rata?
So this is one of my favorite mechanisms about liquidity, actually, because I call it I like to have those video games metaphor, and for me this is a realm versus realm level mechanic, where essentially it depends of it's a matter of essentially how well collateralized you are against the other players.
Okay.
So this is why I call it realm versus, because it's not directly PvP, it's really more. And so the logic of redemption is essentially it starts with the least collateralized trove and move upward depending on how much you redeem. So quite often the redemptions are pretty small amount, compared to the total amount of debt.
Yeah.
So right now we have 280 million amount of debt total ongoing. Maybe someone will redeem 500K, and so they will go against 1% of the trove or not even. So really start from the bottom. The most leveraged person is the one getting hit the hardest by redemption, and then it moves its way upward depending on how much is needed. And there is a growing fee on the redemption to kind of avoid someone coming in and redeeming $100 million worth at once or something like that.
Okay, so that 0.5% isn't quite fixed. Like the
Yeah,
more you redeem, the
it
larger
has
that fee gets.
yeah, it has this mechanism called the base rate, which is essentially a kind of buffer fee that rises up as there is more intensity of usage, and it's a bit like a burning curve, and will lower quickly once the usage volume is
Okay, so it's
lower.
time-based. Like the more that's redeemed this hour, the higher that fee gets. But then if you wait, then the fee will decay again.
It's really an anti-spike mechanism, essentially. Wanting to avoid seeing 20% of the supply redeem in an hour, or the supply doubling in an hour of some guy just posting insane amount of ETH as collateral.
Okay, and so if I understand this correctly, let's say that the least collateralized trove, which is like a CDP, is it's relatively, let's say it's relatively close in value, their debt versus the collateral, because it's the least collateralized. If you, I assume that when you're redeeming, you're sort of reducing the amount of collateral and reducing the amount of debt for that particular trove. And if you're doing that one-to-one, then the resulting difference, it actually becomes more over-collateralized, that particular trove, right?
So that's also what's interesting. That's why it's targeting the least collateralized trove, because it's a bit like, okay, you guys misbehaved. Well, we're gonna force you to behave in a way,
Right.
like you didn't do so good managing your debt, you got redeemed, but don't worry, at least now you're a bit more collateralized, so maybe it doesn't happen to you again.
So it's like an incentive. You want to not be the least collateralized. So if you want your position to not get messed with by people who want to redeem.
But an important point is, before we talked about the liquidation, which takes you to 10%, the redemption is more gentle.
Right.
So you don't get punished, just kind of your collateral is exchanged one-to-one.
Yeah.
So you lose the exposure, which also isn't the best user experience, because if you go back, some of your ETH is away, but it's not kind of punishing you more with a fee or like a liquidation haircut.
Okay, so there's no liquidation fee if your trove is part of a redemption.
Yeah, it's a redemption.
Yeah.
It's not a liquidation.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it essentially makes you. You need to be aware of this notion of essentially we call debt in front of you, but that's literally like, okay, how much LUSD is in troves that are more leveraged than me. So essentially, first in line in the redemptions, they are like tanking the redemption for you. And so every savvy user tends to have this kind of metrics in his head of like, okay, I want 15M of LUSD in front of me. That's like my buffer. I feel like I won't get redeemed. Each has his own approach to it, but yeah.
Cool. Okay. Excuse me. So, hold on. Let me just think about that for a second. Make sure I understand how that works. So if I were to come and redeem, and my redemption would require, the full liquidation, but without the penalty of like 5 different troves, would that all happen in one transaction?
Yeah, now we get so technical that we will need somebody from technical team. I assume for the liquidation, I know it's optimized that you can liquidate several positions just to make it feasible, and the better you can do that in one swing, at least for the liquidation, the more stable and resilient is the system. For the redemption, honestly, I
would assume the same,
Yeah. There's a lot of questions you could ask me about reserve where I would have the same answer. Okay, that's a detail that I haven't looked at in a while. Okay. All right, great. I think I understand that side of it. So let's look at the other side of the peg. If LUSD starts trading above, then what happens there?
Yeah, so here the base hard peg mechanism, as we call them, is the...
What'd you call that?
The hard peg, because, there are like soft peg and hard peg.
Oh,
so those
hard
one
peg,
enforce like very strong limits.
Yep.
So here it's essentially the collateralization ratio, the minimal collateralization ratio of a loan, which is 110%. And so essentially that means that as you go above essentially $110 on a price on LUSD, it becomes an instantly profitable opportunity to just max mint, dump, and pocket the profit. So, if LUSD is trading at 112, for instance, you can just go to Liquity, post ETH as collateral, borrow the maximum amount you can of LUSD, which is 110%, and then sell them and pocket the 2% difference. Like, you don't even care if your trove is liquidated at this point. You made money just minting LUSD and selling them.
Let's make it complete.
Yeah,
You have, let's say you have a $100 of ETH, and now the LUSD is at 120. So you get 100 LUSD, it's worth 120.
You just mint LUSD and swap them instantly back to ETH, and you're in profit.
So you will sell it to realize the profit, which gives the sell pressure. And now you hold, let's say, 120 in USDC, and if your collateral gets wiped out, you just lost 110. So you made an immediate arbitrage profit of 10. So everything that's above 110 triggers this sell pressure. So you have this hard peg mechanism between 1 and 110. You have strong guarantees that the stablecoin will be in that band.
So the minimum collateralization ratio is 110%?
Yes.
Wow, that's so close to 100.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm sure there's lots of reasons for that. So basically that means that, I see. So if LUSD is trading at anything above $1.10, then you can it's just an open arbitrage basically. You deposit, you borrow the maximum amount, you go and sell it. And like you said, you can basically walk away from that position because you've just instantly profited. I want to make sure this is clear for someone viewing. So let me just explain that as an example. So let's say that you guys just did this, but I'll do it again anyway. Sorry. So let's say, like you said in your example, it's trading at $1.20. Let's be extreme. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to deposit, $1,100,000 worth of ETH, which allows me to mint 1 million LUSD, which at that price of $1.20 is worth $1,200,000, which I go sell for whatever. And then let's follow that through though. So now I have this position that's right at the point of liquidation. And I don't care if it gets liquidated. But so let's say I do just walk away. And then let's say the ETH goes down, a couple percent, and it does get liquidated. So I had added 1 million LUSD to circulation, but then when it gets liquidated, doesn't that just buy the million LUSD
so this
out of
is
circulation
where
again?
you need to have, I guess we need to talk about the stability pool.
Okay.
Because your thought process is right, but essentially most of the time, there is no, all the time, there is no LUSD needed to be bought at time of liquidation. Because we have a mechanism that kind of dampen these needs, which is a reserve of LUSD ready to liquidate. So, essentially you can stomach quite a large amount of liquidations without needing to purchase any LUSD on the open market.
Oh, okay. How does that work?
But pretty straightforward. It's actually one of the main emissions there is on the LQTY token, the fee sharing, where essentially you can stake your LUSD in a pool. You get rewarded with a set budget of this LQTY. And this is a liquidation reserve of the protocol. So when there are under collateralized troves, the liquidations are triggered by bots, and they use the funds from the stability pool to repay the debt of the user. And so those stability pool liquidity providers, they are essentially buying ETH when there are liquidations happening with a discount. So it's a bit of a buying option on ETH, backed by the LUSD stable.
Okay, so let me play that back to you. So if I'm an LUSD holder, I can basically deposit my LUSD into this pool, the stability pool?
Yes.
Stability pool. And I basically get dripped, do you call it Liquity or LQTY?
LQTY,
Yeah, I get dripped these Liquity governance token rewards.
Not a governance token.
Oh, not a governance token, okay. What is it?
A fee sharing token is how we call it.
Fee sharing token, okay. So I get dripped these Liquity rewards, the fee sharing token. And I assume that's like a decaying schedule over time.
Yes.
And so if I'm just saving, then I might choose to do that. I guess it seems like that pool will be big if that rate is higher than, what I can get by putting my US dollar capital in other things, and it'll be small if that reward rate is lower than what I can get in like treasuries.
I mean, yeah, historically the yield has been around north of 15% on a yearly average.
Yeah.
So it's getting good deposit, but it's very spiky of a yield because it's highly dependent on liquidations. The base yield from the LQTY budget must be like 3-4%. Most of the yield comes from the liquidation spikes.
Oh, okay. So you're saying, okay. So there's two sources of reward revenue or reward capital. There's the liquidity drip, and then there's also liquidation penalty capital.
Yes, some is from liquidations.
And that's the larger portion of value that's being
Yes.
distributed.
Yes, but much more volatile because, liquidations happen
More
when
volatile,
there is bloat on the market.
But
not
more
every day.
lasting over time.
Yes.
Right? So if those rewards go down, even if they go to zero, you still have this large...
That's real yield, the thing that is all the talk of the town. Like when we've been doing real yield for like 2 years.
Yeah.
But it wasn't sexy back then.
Yeah. We feel similarly. Okay. So then basically if I'm depositing my LUSD, I'm getting sort of paid to do that with any capital that comes from liquidation penalties and also from these liquidity rewards. And you mentioned that it's spiky. Do the liquidation penalties get like immediately distributed, or are they kind of dripped out over time? No, it's immediate.
No, it's immediate.
So you just got to be in the pool when that happens.
Exactly. So it's really really in the mindset of you want to be in there, even if not much happen. If you anticipate some kind of price action, that's actually a good way to buy the dip. If literally you have stable coins, and I don't know, you have insider information or whatsoever, I don't care, but you anticipate a massive dip on ETH tomorrow, just swap them to LUSD, park them in stability pool and wait.
Okay.
And worst come worst, nothing happened. And if you were right on your hypothesis and tomorrow price goes down, probably quite a few bit of liquidation, and you get ETH on the cheap, bought at a discount on the discount, essentially.
So it's like almost like a no-risk way to temporarily short ETH.
So there is a risk, though, which is the situation what we call the double dip. Because, liquidations, they tend to happen. So the price tanks up to the point where liquidation start and you have the liquidation chain. So if it's just one liquidation chain, so here people get liquidated, you get some LUSD converted to ETH at a good price, then let's say there is recovery. You come up the next day, you have your ETH to claim, and there was way more already than the price at which your conversion was done. You're happy. But now the dangerous scenario is the double dip. Got it. Because essentially, here liquidations, you bought some ETH, you're happy, recovery, so you're definitely happy. But if you didn't sell those ETH and there is another dip right in front, then you had a good purchase on the first run, but now it dipped 20% further after that. So
okay. So basically, if and this makes sense, I was going to ask about this, but if your LUSD is in that pool, it can be seized, presumably pro rata with everyone else in the pool.
Converted to ETH,
and converted to ETH. And now you have this ETH position, which it's on you to go withdraw and sell that if you don't want ETH exposure.
There is a protocol automating that if you want to just deposit LUSD and kind of be more passive, then they do take care of settling the ETH obtained back to LUSD at a favorable price. But the base stability pool is you just get ETH and liquidity.
Yeah, you would take the protocol if you just want to benefit from the yield, so you don't get exposure to ETH. Or you have the other people that say, hey, I want the ETH. So it's a great opportunity for retail users that are not watching all the time the market to be able to buy the dip and not leave it to all the professional traders. And it's like a DCAing into ETH, but not just regularly over time. You have no guarantee you're going to go into ETH over time. But if a dip happens, you're part of it. So actually it happened to our treasury because we had some LUSD, we deposited to get some yield. And then the crash almost a year ago happened. And I also forgot it. Then I got on our safe and I was like, hey, where is our LUSD? We somehow deposited more. And then, okay, now we bought ETH, below 1,000 because we were part when it dipped. Yeah.
That's interesting because if you just put a limit order on an exchange, you have to pick a particular price. Yeah. But this is basically saying it's like a programmatic way of buying when there's blood in the streets.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. You're kind of trusting the liquidation and buying at most of your buying volume will be at the peak of the liquidation, which is usually quite a decent price, pending that double dip scenario with a little time in between.
Right.
Yeah, but it's like DCAing. You do that over time. It's a strategy, and you need to be aware that just every time it had went up, you filled your bags with ETH. I think which might be a
at a philosophical
strategy
level
in the space.
It's a really cool one too, because it's maybe I should have started with that, but for me, I describe it as a way to democratize access to the liquidation revenues. And if you think about it, that's also literally, it's not the main. Initially, Stability Pool exists because of, I want to say, engineering concern. It's here to make sure the system can liquidate and whatsoever fulfill its duties. But one of the consequences of that is literally anyone can access now the liquidation revenues. So on Avi, on Maker, on other platform, you need to essentially have access to capital and operate the bot infrastructure. Right. And so here we still have bots that needs to trigger those liquidation, and they get some share of the fees collected. But as a passive user, without being too savvy, you can still get exposed just by putting your LUSD in Stability Pool.
It's a lot like how market making traditionally required a lot of sophistication, and now you can just deposit into an LP position and let the smart contract handle it for you, but for liquidation participation.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool.
And maybe just that now that we touched on the Stability Pool and the instant liquidation, at the beginning you introduced kind of, we're similar to Maker. And actually, we are very similar to, or I have to say, Robert, the founder, was inspired by single collateral DAI, which was quite close. But he has seen, some ways to make it better. And one part was the instant liquidation, which gives you a higher capital efficiency because you have this better loan to value ratio. So that was part of the innovation where he wanted to improve the system. The other one is making it more attractive with the one-off fee, 0.5%, so a cheaper loan. And also kind of you have to guarantee the cost of your loan up front. Maker or Aave, rates can go up, or now on Curve USD. So that was the second part. And the third part, kind of the third value proposition, is that he said, hey, I think for such a system we don't need a governance. That can be an autonomous system where we don't need to govern, where we can fully decentralize and reduce at least the risk vector from governance or malicious behavior. It still has a technical risk. So these were the three things which really differentiated Liquity and which he wanted to improve. And then things changed. The fourth would have been you had the redemptions. Maker didn't have redemptions, but then they added a PSM, more censorship collateral, a bigger governance, and so on. But just kind of people that know and understand Maker, I think, it's very similar, except I think these are three propositions that are unique for the Liquity system. Yeah.
Okay. And so, there's no governance.
No.
Yeah, okay. I want to get to what fee sharing token means in a second, but there's something I will have to follow up on before I forget. So we had talked about how, with that mechanism of sort of the hard peg that's, at $1.10 basically, we had talked about how, this could lead to someone issuing, in that example, 1 million LUSD, and then but then if their position gets liquidated, million LUSD would be taken out of circulation, except not really, because it would come from the Stability Pool, right? So that's sort of how that came up.
I mean, it's taking a lot of circulation, but the key thing is it doesn't require you to buy LUSD on the open market at time of liquidation. So you can avoid this rush to the door kind of scenario you can have on other, DAI spiking up in price because everybody is getting liquidated on Maker, and no, DAI is suddenly super scarce because everybody is looking to buy DAI to repay back their debt or liquidate someone.
That makes sense.
And but just let's make the link, because you said 110. The collateralization ratio isn't high, and that has to do with the instant liquidation. So you have the Stability Pool that allows instant liquidation, so you can be more aggressive. And to compare it to Maker, where the collateral is auctioned off, there it takes more time, so the collateralization ratio needs to be higher. Because in the same time, or until you kind of can sell the collateral, more time can pass, and you need to accommodate for a higher volatility.
Okay.
Sorry.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I was going to ask about how the instant liquidation works, but I see it's just the capital is just there all the time. So function gets called, balances update, and that's it, right?
Pretty much just a transfer of assets.
And that's just in response to an Oracle price feed of some kind, I assume. Like
It needs to be triggered, but then
but like anyone can call that transaction. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, what happens though if that stability pool gets completely cleared, and/or why is it the case that it would never get completely cleared, if that's the case?
So there is my other second most favorite mechanism of liquidity. I call it the communist mode.
Communist mode?
Yeah, I'll get into it right in a minute. So it's redistribution. Redistributive liquidation is how we call them. And so this is essentially how the protocol liquidates on an empty stability pool. But as far as I know of, we never saw it in practice, right?
I don't think so.
We got some few close calls. So like there were days where maybe 80% of the stability pool was depleted on the day. But it kind of has this nice built-in incentives that the more the stability pool is depleted, the more interesting it is to be in stability pool. Because now you get less people sharing the same LQTY budget, but maybe you started the morning with 500 million LUSD in that pool. You end up in the evening with 50 million. So now the LQTY yield went 10x. And then the liquidation volume really is more volatile, depends on what happened. But if you use 90% of the pool on the morning, it's likely that you'll use some more during the day. So it kind of refills pretty quickly, essentially. That's the first thing.
Cool.
But yeah, this redistribution mechanism is a bit like a logic similar to redemption, where essentially it uses the troves on liquidity to liquidate the trove that needs to be liquidated. And the way it works is this time it uses the most collateralized trove, because essentially you're making them accrue debt, but in favorable condition. So essentially it's like friends, you play poker with your friends, and you have this guy who got 2 or 3 refill and go for another all-in and lose it. And you're like, okay, we're going to bail him out, So we just buy your debt and we get your collateral kind of situation. That's really what the redistribution is. So if you have like a 50 East trove that has 100K LUSD debt that needs to be liquidated because price of this is, you do the math, it will just, literally like distribute both the collateral and the debt amongst the most collateralized trove on the platform. So overall, it's net beneficial for the overall LTV of the protocol. It ensures the liquidation of the least collateralized trove. And yes, it lowers a little bit the collateralization of the trove that it's being redistributed to. But this is why it's picking the most collateralized troves, so that, it's not affecting the step. Overall, it's increasing the collateralization of the system.
Okay, so basically then it's not actually buying any LUSD off the open market yet.
Again, it's just a transfer, yeah.
It's just a transfer of debt and
collateral.
So basically, we're saying, okay, let me think about how that would work. So, it's like we have some. Okay, yeah. So we have my trove that I created, and it's my throwaway trove that I did to ARB. So it's going to get liquidated. Let's say for whatever reason, it's been a crazy week and there's nothing in the stability pool, even though it's never happened, could potentially happen. And so then my debt has to be moved to the most collateralized trove. So it's like $1 million in LUSD debt, or I don't know if it'd be some partial amount, but whatever.
Yeah, it's pro rata between.
I think it's pro rata,
It goes into several troves because we
I
don't
think
want
it's
to
all
massively.
pro rata, but
it's pro rata depending on the collateralization. So it means essentially most of the pro rata is absorbed by the most collateralized troves.
Got it. So the most collateralized troves are like, but everyone, but pro rata absorbs the debt. So everyone has a little bit more debt, but they also have a little bit more collateral because they absorb all of my collateral. And so in a way, let's see. So in a way, like,
it's like forcing you to buy ETH essentially.
But there's also there's a penalty on me. or no?
The guy getting liquidated gets a penalty, so that's why it's still a net positive operation for the people that are used as liquidity for this redistribution, because essentially the trade-off goes like this: you're forced into buying ETH at the time you did not choose, because it just happened, but at least you got a slightly better than the market rate at the time it happened.
Because basically the troves that are being modified, they're the recipients of my penalty.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, because it's a liquidation, so there's still the liquidation premium happening, and this is what makes it a bit more interesting for you than market price.
And the penalty is 10%, basically?
Up to 10%.
It's whatever percent is left.
Yeah, exactly.
So if ETH crashed, 10% in a nanosecond, then there's no penalty. But if it crashed 5%, then there's a 5% left for the penalty. Okay. And so then let me just complete that thought. So basically then, so let's say it's like $1,050,000 worth of ETH and $1 million worth of debt. And so then that $50,000 difference is what's getting distributed pro rata to the other trove holders effectively.
No, that's then the profit they made, but the whole trove needs to be...
The whole thing's distributed,
but
that's what's distributed
like
in terms of like the income that they're getting in exchange for that. Okay. Okay. All right. And then is it even necessary to have any other mechanism for like actual market liquidations if all troves are at like, 110 or below, or is that not even necessary?
I mean, these are the two mechanisms. So the stability pool is usually in place because it's attractive. There is a fallback if it's empty or the incentives are not too high. And these are the two mechanisms. So this should enable then a graceful wind down at the end of the system.
What would happen though if it seems like nearly impossible to co-occur all at once, but what if everyone's troves were all at, 120 and then they all dropped to 118 at the same moment? Then what would the system do?
So yeah, we had an interesting chat about this. I think there is a built-in assumption that there is always one trove. And if you get really crafty, there is a way to do something about this. But essentially the game is you need to liquidate all existing trove on Liquity. So good luck with that. Yeah. And then if you manage to be that one trove, what was the way? You could do something interesting, but it's essentially like a redistribution on yourself or something like that.
I guess there would be still an incentive for people to deposit into the stability pool and then the ordinary liquidation mechanism.
So yeah, the stability pool is a good regulation mechanism because if you only have one trove, so essentially everybody is wiped out in terms of debt. So then this guy with the one trove is the only one able to mint LUSD at actual cost. The others, they might buy it on the market, but it all depends on what is the liquidity, and it's likely to be very scarce if you only have one trove left.
Yeah.
So essentially this one guy with his one trove is the only one who can access at cost the LUSD staking in stability pool. And since there might not be many LUSD staking left, he gets access to a nice yield. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy you don't have that many LUSD left. You have all incentive to kind of mint some more. So stability pool that would kind of relaunch the machine.
Yeah. And obviously we're talking about vanishingly unlikely scenarios, but it's, just like Maker with the original global settlement, I think it's now emergency shutdown. You kind of have to think through all those scenarios because it's all relevant to the game theory of how it all works under normal circumstances.
And I really like protocols that have this kind of design, Even I like protocols that have a design that, okay, this is an emergency system we never use. Cool, I'm glad you have it, It's like when I go on a boat, they have like lifeboats. Most of the time we don't use them.
Right.
It's glad we have lifeboats, It's a good thing to have.
Right.
So this kind of thinking, it's a bit like we haven't touched on this one yet, I guess, but we can get into it, the recovery mode, which is a bit of a deterrent design, essentially, to ensure collateralization of the protocol in extreme situations. And this one has been triggered, but only like a few times right after launch. And since then has been playing his role of scarecrow kind of pretty well, where users haven't triggered it since. It's been almost 2 years, and they haven't re-triggered it. It's all based on user input, how much they collateralize. So you really see also like people kind of discovering the protocols, its rules, and learning about it. Yeah.
Well, now that you mentioned, maybe give a bit context about the recovery mode. New word, new concept. So at the end, the system is designed so it's always over collateralized to have the value for the stablecoin. Otherwise, the protocol would accrue bad debt and people would get hurt. So the over collateralization of the whole system is important, and the incentives are made so that it's over collateralized, usually above 200% right now, but it can get lower. And as soon as it gets lower than 150 overall troves, before the 110 was just for your own personal trove, but now we're looking at the system health. And if it goes closer to 150, then we say, okay, now we need to take some precaution, kind of emergency level 1 for the safety precaution. And then that's when the recovery mode kicks in. Then we say, okay, now the buffer we have gets tighter, and that's what you meant with recovery mode. So if the overall collateralization of the system goes below 150, then more troves, which are your CDP positions, can be liquidated. Before, only the ones with 110. And if you say, hey, now we have this system-wide kind of smaller buffer, then to prevent bad debt, also other positions can be liquidated to increase the health of the overall system. And that's an extreme measure, which is good that it's there and you need to be aware of it. But as you said, I think it has only been triggered once or twice in really extreme conditions. And you see it, and then you need to be aware. And if then your trove in this moment is below your personal one, below 150, you have the risk that you get liquidated. What's the worst thing that happens when you get liquidated? Okay, you get a 10% haircut.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I guess this is where we got lucky with Liquity is in terms of ETH price action, they pretty much, I wasn't even in the team back then, but they pretty much had the full stress test of everything possible within the 3 months of existence of the protocol. You know? So protocol launched on an ETH up only, and people were leveraging like crazy. And I think it's like 1.5 billion LUSD cracked in not even a month or something. Like the early growth is insane.
Wow.
But then, ETH price divided by 2 in a week and redivided by 2 roughly after that or something like that. So you really see the supply going up, and then the liquidation waves, and finally it's kind of more threshold that it's sustaining things. But yeah, the system has been like intensely stress tested very early on, and this is when this recovery mode triggering happened.
Yeah, and there is the legend, Let's talk some legends or no, it's a true story. So in the beginning, Justin Sun had also a huge trove, I think $1 billion.
$1 billion?
Yeah. He stress tested that. Thanks, Justin Sun, for trusting us and kind of battle testing the system. And during that time, the collateralization ratio, I think that's almost the only time went below 150. And at this point in time, I think for a minute or several seconds, you could liquidate Justin Sun. So somebody needs to trigger that, and you get a reward for that. I think it's 0.5% of the
collateral,
of kind of the liquidation gains. And because there were no bots, everything was new, early DeFi, the whole space missed that. He topped then up, but that would be extremely profitable if you would have been able in this small window when this big trove was liquidatable. So that's just an example where it happens.
Worth of ETH for the person clicking that button. Yeah, this is what he was collecting.
Wild.
Yeah, the early days of.
But it was only an opportunity for a few minutes.
Yeah, or even less.
Not even.
Funny. Okay, so the thread I want to follow next is still related to that peg mechanism a little bit, because I mentioned at the beginning the awesome blue chip rating that got me excited about all this. Some people have noted, though, it's been fascinating with blue chip launching, where some people are really happy about it, some people are really pissed off about it. There's like lots of controversy.
You just look at the ranking they got on the stable, and usually it mapped pretty clearly.
It does.
Correlates, I think.
But there's also people out there who aren't stablecoin issuers who think it's great. Some people who think it's terrible. Anyway, it's good. It's getting attention. But one complaint I saw was, well, wait a minute. Liquity, the LUSD, it floats above $1. And so if you buy it at $1 too, and then it goes back down to its intended dollar peg, well, you've lost significant money there. And that's a problem. How can you give an A, they said, to a coin that like drifts around like that if it's meant to be a stable coin, because people could lose money? And so I'm curious, like, you mentioned that there's this hard peg mechanism. Is there another mechanism that keeps it, because it doesn't really drift all the way up to $1.10 all the time. There must be something that's keeping it closer. What's that? But why does it drift? Why doesn't it just stay? Why doesn't it like never go above $1?
So yeah, the other part of the peg first, you have to consider the borrower side, where they know about this 110 ceiling essentially, but no, it's a bit of a race between them in terms of if you have a trove on liquidity and you see LUSD going up in price, then you could be considering minting more LUSD to just dump them to ETH and essentially pocket that premium. You see LUSD at 107 and you're like, oh, I'm confident it's going to be back at 100 tomorrow. Well, why not mint some, dump them, pocket that premium. Tomorrow you buy them back at 1 and you pay back your debt even. So this mechanism, but it's really essentially everybody can look at each other in the eye. 101, you move, you don't move. No, not enough profit yet. It goes up, but they kind of know that 110, it's like falling on your face. So you kind of react before 110 because that's kind of the max profit. But the closer you get to 110, and the more there are other people kind of on the move too. So it's really a matter of gauging when are people going to move en masse, and you want to front run them just by a little bit. This is the safest position, kind of. So this really helps create this pressure in terms of minting. You could also borrow it in other venues now and just sell it. And then for the price, volatility, it's a bit of another consequence of the design, because even with all of that, it's all mechanism kind of gaining attractiveness the farther you move from $1, but they don't become instantly profitable as soon as LUSD is 1.00001 to sell it to make this 0.0001% of profit. It needs a bit of more margin, so that's why you tend to see a bit more fluctuation on the LUSD's price. But yeah, lately it's been increasingly contained though, with different approaches, different liquidity initiatives, and other things that are being led. That was really in the vision of containing that premium to the maximum, not like reducing its absolute value, but really more about the fluctuation of it. Because as you were highlighting, it's a question of when someone buys LUSD or borrow LUSD and sell them, he doesn't want to see like a 3 or 4% spread on his LUSD price a few months from now.
Right.
Because then, of course, it could be on the good side of that spread, but it could also be on the bad side of the spread. It's not ideal for
it's
the
like
borrower
if you need to
experience.
go repay your loan and it's trading at $1.03 or whatever, then that might actually be more than the 0.5% you paid to open the loan.
Yeah, so you need to be aware of that. And maybe also, why does LUSD has this hard peg or this spectrum? Why isn't it perfect? That's a trade-off. And it's a trade-off because Liquid has only ETH as a collateral. And I think it's the best mechanism to have even this good range with this volatile collateral. The alternative is, why have other stablecoins a better peg? Maker, the DAI, was also much more volatile, and they introduced the PSM, so a stabilization module. So then you have a better peg, but at the cost that you take in a collateral, another stablecoin, which is maybe centralized, has ties to kind of the real world, and then you have a better peg. So that's cool, but kind of you lose some properties. And I think LUSD and Liquidity just kind of wanted to maximize for kind of the properties of decentralization. And that's a bit the price I have to pay. And still it was an innovation to keep it so close. And I think that there isn't another mechanism out there that is better for that.
I have a pitch for you.
Yeah.
I have a pitch for how the peg, I think, could be kept tighter without any compromises on decentralization. I'm sure you guys have thought about this and there's some reason why it won't work, but just in case not, let me try to explain it. Because if it did work, I think it could be really cool. So what if, in roughly the same way that people can come and redeem 1 LUSD for $1 worth of ETH minus the fee, what if you could do the same thing, and that affects the least collateralized trove? What if the protocol made the same sort of offer but in reverse. So check this out. Imagine you show up with $1 worth of ETH, and you deposit it not to create a trove, but just to mint one LUSD.
Yeah.
And it does a similar thing that you were talking about before, but it would distribute, let's see, the $1 worth of ETH would be distributed pro rata to all the troves in exchange for increasing their debt by $1 pro rata, 1 LUSD pro rata, and that 1 LUSD would go to the person who had showed up. And so that way, that would reduce the total over-collateralization of the system, but it would make it so that you could mint LUSD for $1 worth of ETH. You could have a little fee there too. You can have maybe the same rate limiting thing or whatever. And that way, the same peg mechanism roughly that you're using to the downside, you could use to the upside, and you could keep a tighter peg around $1.
It's really sexy for the stable. It's a bit less for the borrowers because now you have one more mechanism where your debt can evolve while you're sleeping,
It's true. It's true. It's true.
So it's just kind of these things, redemption is a good way of keeping a ceiling or a floor, but like you don't want it to be the main mechanism.
Yeah.
Because for the user it's tough, but also keep in mind for the system perspective it's also not ideal because it's a double net loss. You're burning my stable to get collateral out.
Yeah.
And I think we looked at several mechanisms, and at the end, somewhere there is always a twist, because then in that point of price, maybe the price is so high. So we've done a lot of these things. And honestly, after 3 or 4 days of conferences, I think I'm just not up to the level to go to the rabbit hole. And I think there we would really need, talk more to the technical guy, because they modeled everything and had everything in their head, and
but Ed had a design
exactly
that, so internally there were already people
so just now detailing it out. I think we're just filming.
Because I guess that it brings us to a higher level point now that we've talked about a bunch of these mechanisms, which is as you were saying, there's a trade-off between optimizing the stablecoin user experience and offering the borrower user experience.
Sometimes it's even a tension, not just a trade-off. Let's use the word, because the way I put it is essentially the tougher you are on your borrowers, the more resilient is your stable. And it's you have to choose. You want a resilient stablecoin, at least we did.
Right.
But you also want people to want to borrow it, so you can't be too hard on them.
Right.
Because else nobody's here borrowing it. So it's really it's a direct connection between the two. So redemptions are a bit rough on borrowers because now they can have their position evolve, even when they don't want to, depending on how collateralized they are. But redemptions are super, super positive to LUSD holders because now they have this stable that is not only backed by ETH, but literally directly redeemable to ETH without needing any liquidity anyway. Mm-hmm. You just, Curve is empty, Uniswap is empty for whatever reason. I don't care. I go to Liquidity contract, immutable code, burn LUSD, get ETH.
Yep.
So that's okay, maybe that's not the best price or whatsoever, but on a day like this where liquidity is a real concern, I'm pretty sure you're happy to get 99% of your worth instantly to ETH with no question asked.
If you could have done that with USDC over that weekend, people absolutely would have done it.
You see? Yeah, exactly. So you kind of get it.
Yeah. So, okay. And so is the total size of, troves and LUSD, do you guys think of it as being more limited by demand for LUSD, the stablecoin, or more limited by demand for troves and borrowing?
Mm-hmm. I think it's clear. Liquidity, or the CDP-based system, is first a borrowing system. Mm-hmm. So the stablecoin only comes into existence through the borrowing. So it's really depending on the borrowing demand, and that's also the thing that restricts scalability. So in a bull market, it's great. Everything is borrowing, is leveraging, so you have a lot of supply. Mm-hmm. In a bear market, you don't have.
Yeah, so it is kind of more limited by the borrowing demand.
Yeah, because the stablecoin only comes, there's no other way the stablecoin comes into existence unless somebody borrows.
And so that does sort of explain why you want to make sure to look after that borrower user experience and not take too many trade-offs against it. But like I pointed out, it does seem like as a borrower, if I know that there's some variability in the price of the asset that I need to buy to repay my loan, that is a drag on the borrower user experience, right? So if it was perfectly tightly pegged and I knew that I could repay my loan always without that like possible extra 2 or 3% fee, then that would improve the borrower experience. So it's kind of it's a negative and a positive for the borrower, I would say.
Yeah, it's really like it's volatility at the end of the day. So it's depend on how savvy the borrower is. It can be even a nice net positive effect
Yeah.
to have this fluctuating premium.
Interesting.
But you know, it's really that. I mean, it's like the trade-off of the system. But at least from a borrower perspective, another way to avoid this is simply to keep the LUSD they borrow as such, because you know the price exposure you get only when you're swapping your LUSD out to something else. But now if you just like borrow, place them in stability pool, so you will keep mostly LUSD exposure. You might have some ETH, but you know not so much.
Yeah.
So then you know when comes the time to pay back your debt, when you want to, you already have LUSD, so you're not exposed to this price risk. That's another way. Or use chicken bonds or other solutions where you can essentially keep a pure LUSD exposure. It's also another nice way to kind of remove yourself from this price exposure.
But what fraction of borrowers are borrowing in a way where they're just depositing into the stability pool or somehow, you know, holding or lending LUSD in particular versus swapping to something else to like buy a car or to like leverage long or something? Do you know what that percentage breakdown is?
Yeah, no, not exactly, but yeah, it's literally like the three main categories are people leveraging their ETH to buy more ETH, people leveraging their ETH to buy other stuff, coins, pre-sale, a house, whatsoever.
Yep.
And then I guess the third main category would just be like essentially people using liquidity as a way to make yield on their ETH. So, you know, they borrow LUSD, but they want to keep them as such because really they see the LUSD as a mean in the yield infrastructure that is ETH-based and will take profit in ETH eventually.
Yeah. Is there a borrowing market, like a secondary borrowing market for LUSD yet?
Yeah, you can borrow LUSD on Avi on 3 chains, and you have a few other like smaller tier money markets that are starting to list it.
So if that rate were high enough, I might put it there instead of the stability pool.
For instance, yeah, that was actually
an LP pool or.
Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. I feel like I've gotten to level 1 understanding. So maybe we'll take a little bit of a break and think about where we want to go next. Okay, so let's keep going on overview. Whatever subjects you think are most relevant for the next bit.
Yeah, I think one part we didn't touch on, and I think which makes Liquidity and LUSD really special and unique, is the decentralization, so the properties of the protocol and of the stablecoin. I would say it's the only major stablecoin that is fully decentralized. So to be a bit provocative, what Bitcoin is for money, Liquidity is a bit for stablecoin, you know, this real sound sovereign stablecoin. And maybe we can touch on a bit why this is, or kind of what are the properties, how it's built, and how it differentiates from other stablecoins.
Great.
Yeah, I think the important part is, what a lot of people don't realize is that every dollar you hold is not the same. You know, it really depends. Also, every stablecoin is different and has a different risk profile. And I think the beauty of LUSD is its non-rockability. Rock, you know, to rock. Nobody can rock it.
Non-ruggability.
Ruggability, yeah. Because you have full control, you know. It's the stable coin, the protocol is immutable, so nobody can change anything. There is no governance. Nobody, you will know forever how it works and nobody can interfere with it. And because as a collateral we have only ETH, which is endogenous to DeFi, it's the only stablecoin that's really kind of has no ties outside the system. So that's still technical. What does it mean for you as a user? So what we've seen recently, that people think more and more about diversifying their stablecoin portfolio, because LUSD has this property. It's the only stablecoin which you can move anytime you want and nobody can interfere. I mean, that's different from USDC, where you have blacklisting and freezing functions. Then you always have the guarantee that it's backed and you see it with ETH as a collateral. Again, with USDC, you have no idea, you hope so, but you can't verify. So again, that makes it very solid. You can redeem anytime. You also said, with USDC you couldn't. So that gives you a lot of freedom and security as a holder. And the last thing is, because the collateral is only ETH, kind of nobody can interfere with that. And that's the biggest difference to the other decentralized stablecoins like DAI and Frax, which hold USDC. And what's USDC? That's cash and money market stuff or treasuries held by Circle. So again, there you have a dependency. So kind of the LUSD gives you the most freedom and control over your dollar, I would say, besides just holding cash. And I mean, if you're in DeFi and if you're digital, in my opinion, it's the most sound dollar you can hold.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the immutability and no control. So you have no asymmetry of information, no asymmetry of control. And the protocol, just to put it into perspective, has run for 2 years autonomously, fully on its own, because it's automated, it has no governance, has managed in the time 4.5 billion in loans. Also with no back office, with no overhead. It's really lean, It has been deployed.
Yeah.
It's like a self-service vending machine. I can go to this self-service vending machine, borrow and have this LUSD dollar. But that brings me back. I think it's an important point, and it's why I joined Liquidity, because I said, hey, that's the way I think we should all try to design protocols in the way. And I understand not everything can be mutable, and maybe you need a governance, but at the end, that's what we should strive for, taking out intermediaries or persons that have control, because history has learned us that if somebody has control, probably they're going to play with it. And that's what I meant with non-rockability.
Yeah.
So besides technical flaws, there are no ways somebody can kind of interfere with it. And this gives you a lot of security and freedom holding LUSD. So kind of OGs like Tetranode or others really like to hold at least some portion of it in something you control. And something we also did for our own treasury, because we didn't know what happens with USDC, the USD rails. So just having that by the side kind of gives you a lot of freedom.
Totally. How does the system not need to change which oracles it refers to over time? That seems like something that's very hard to get away from governance-wise. But is there really no governance on that question either?
Yeah, that's a good point. And users need to be aware of it. So that's actually the only thing that is maybe the least decentralized, or where you have a link or a dependency, because it depends on oracles. And it's immutable, so it's Chainlink as a primary oracle.
Okay.
But because the team really wanted to do it in the right way and show that it's possible to build such systems, they thought of a backup mechanism. So to not only be reliant on one oracle, so they added quite some logic to have a second one, which is Teller. So at least to have a backup, if Chainlink goes down, that the secondary, that's like a fallback oracle can come up. Yeah.
Yep. But that's not changeable over time. It's just Chainlink with the backup of Teller.
No parameters of the system can ever be changed.
So if those two oracle providers were to go out of business or whatever, then that version would have to wind down. You just launch a new version and you use that.
Yeah, this is what Micheal meant, where ideally we wanted protocol where the only way to shut it down would be to shut down the Ethereum network. That would be, the ideal situation in terms of resilience. And Liquidity is super close to that, because essentially the only other way would be to attack, manipulate at the same time Chainlink and Teller is price feed, and then you can make essentially Liquidity dance in a way it shouldn't be. But that's still, low likelihood kinds of scenario. Because you need to have both of them at once with the fallback Micheal was describing. It's not just one is not enough.
Right.
So from a logic point of view, is similar a bit to the Uniswap versions. It's deployed, Uniswap can't change anything.
Yep.
There is a new version, you can deploy that then. But again, as a user in control. If I don't like the old system, I can migrate my funds.
Yep. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, and then, like, has anyone ever tried to manipulate those oracles, or is that just not really a problem?
Of course, there is always
I'm-
arbitrage attempts, or as soon as there is something managing money, people will try to.
But I think
try their luck with it.
it was quite reliable. I'm not aware. I mean, it's the ETH/USD price feed. I mean, whole DeFi,
Right.
except Uniswap and maybe Curve, are dependent on these things. It's the on and off switch a bit of DeFi.
Yeah.
So that's something we rely on. Yeah, but as you said, if that feed doesn't work, I think the whole thing crumbles. Yeah, with
Okay.
it.
Okay. Is there any sort of logic in the smart contract to, I don't know, like if the price feed, suddenly jumps by 100% to ignore that, or like any things like that, or
That's within the fallback logic, essentially, where
Okay.
you kind of checks the two oracles against one another to get a sense of massive movement. And this is usually when it takes a decision,
Okay.
You deem like some oracle untrustworthy, essentially, if it observes a massive spike compared to the other oracle, then switch to the other oracle, monitor the situation on the other side, and switch back when resolved.
Okay. Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough because, like, you want the system to respond quickly to big movements, but also if there's big movements, you might also want it to sort of chill and not do anything. So I guess there must be a lot of thinking in that particular logic of how to deal with that. But it's you find this a lot where, like, you have to think about those pieces of logic for maybe 1,000 hours or something to, like, make sure they're right, but then you almost never get to test them until, like, the actual black swan day, and then you find out if you got it right. But that sounds like that hasn't happened for oracles yet. Like, some of the other mechanisms have been triggered, but oracles, like, has it always just stayed with the Chainlink
Oh, did
oracle?
we ever have a fallback? I don't even think so, right?
What?
Did we ever fall back to Taylor?
No.
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
Because you need
I mean,
massive. It would be a massive chaining failure, essentially, if we fall back to Taylor.
Right.
It's not like,
Right.
chaining is 1 second slower than usual. Like,
Yeah.
the system can stomach that. It's really like, Chainlink is reporting a price 50% away from the previous report, or
Right.
Chainlink hasn't updated for the last hour,
Right.
something like.
And I mean, most protocols, except for DEXs, using these oracles, and often they even don't have a fallback.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's very important that people are aware in the space, but you're exposed to it
Right.
kind of
Totally.
as long as you don't just hold ETH in your wallet.
I want to do a deep dive like this on Chainlink because of how fundamental it is. I don't
Yeah.
personally understand all the particulars of exactly how it could or couldn't fail. So, yeah.
And just going back, I think something that the protocol also pioneered, and I was first quite, how can I say? I wouldn't know if I would have rolled it out like that, but I think in hindsight, I think it was very cool that we have this extreme positioning of resilience and kind of catering to the niche, where we now are really the only DeFi stablecoin that has these properties, which has some TVL and some usage. So it's often also called the stablecoin of last resort. Everybody goes to, and it has to do with this decentralization, which is not just, let's break it up. We call it sometimes also full stack decentralization. Because decentralization, you need to break it up. So yeah, you have a decentralization that you don't have control on the smart contracts and other stuff, but also on the front end. So that was something Liquity introduced that said, hey, we don't want to run as a company the front end. We want a diversification of front end, so we're not reliant, and we don't introduce one single person or entity that controls them. Also this part.
I've heard about that. And so how does that work? It's like the front end somehow get paid, right? Like, how do they do that?
Yeah, so first of all, on the website, there is a list of front ends, so that are independent parties that run the front end. Liquity only provides a UI kit, the code. People can download it, modify it, and run it. Some have just run it, like DeFi Saver have built on top of it functionality. And for some use cases, they get the fee, but they can set it themselves. But I think these are mostly people of the community that like the project and want to support it. At the end, it's now a public good. It's out there, everybody can use it, nobody can change it. So I think it's good that people also take care a bit of that, you know? If we want to have this public good, it's not just somebody provides it to me. A lot of people forget that, you know? They want this public service, but nobody kind of takes care of it or helps in Discord or runs a front end. So I'm glad that these people are around and are aware of it and kind of contributing to it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, and it's a bit, someone just like brought this to my light yesterday. I never really thought of this, but it's a bit of a dynamic pricing mechanism, essentially what happens on the front end.
Okay.
So, they have this kickback rate, which is essentially a share of the LQT you farm when you deposit LUSD in stability pool with them that they can get for them. So if they have like 95% kickback rate, it means they take 5% fee on that and they give you back 95%. So what happened so far, as Micheal was describing, is most of those integrations, they run on 99 to 100% kickback rate. So they take close to no fee on the base stuff, and they will build advanced features on top of it, automated leverage, automated repayment of your debt or things like that, where they might require swaps, for instance, and will take a small fee on the swaps. That's like right now as a situation where, let's say, the cost to run a Liquity front end is quite low in the sense that, there is no state deeming you a terrorist because you're running a Liquity front end, or we're not in any blacklist or whatsoever, which are things that could happen. If we walk into a world where this happened, the dynamic evolve in an interesting manner.
Right.
Because, say we take an horrible case, but like you're an instant, like, I don't know, criminal if you run a Liquity front end by American law or whatsoever.
Yeah.
No, you probably won't have those guys at 100% kickback anymore. I expect them to vanish or, to go around quite quickly.
Right.
But what I expect to pop also quite quickly is like uber resilient, super anon front end. We already have some of them, but maybe this guy will, charge 5% fee and only give you 95% kickback rate.
Right.
And in a normal time, it wouldn't have fared so well because people would be like, why should I pay your fee? I can just use the other. But in a time where literally, it's either you hit the contracts directly with EtherScan if you know how to do it, or you have this front end that is a little clunky but still works and charge you 5%, can I expect the users will use the front end quite a lot. So you could see these situations where, like the pricing model of the front end essentially evolve depending of how dangerous it is to run a front end.
Right.
I don't know if it was part of this initial logic, but I find it quite elegant because, it's essentially a safety budget that scales up as the risk increases, which is quite perfect. You're not overpaying in normal time, but in times of needs, it's kind of building up automatically an incentives to come fulfill the service.
Cool. So on a technical level, how does the front end receive part of that fee? Is it like the front end provider, they just have like an address that gets submitted as part of certain transactions in order to have part of those liquidity rewards or other transaction fees or whatever go to them?
They register their front end.
Okay.
And then the important fee, so that sometimes gets confused. Liquidity has several use cases. You have the borrowing use case, depositing in stability pool, staking LQTY. So this fee is only on the stability pool, where you put your LUSD and want to be part of the liquidation, not for the borrowing. And so people sometimes, if you borrow it, you can take any front end, that's just kind of the fee the protocol takes. It takes no other cut.
Okay.
And if you put in a stability pool, so as you remember, there are two fee sources, the LQTY, which is streaming, and the ETH liquidation. So on this LQTY, they get a cut and can decide how much.
Got it. Okay. And for the people who are doing it with 100% to the depositor, they're just doing it because they think it's cool and they want to support it.
This, or they have more advanced features on top where they charge fees. So typically DeFi server give you 100% kickback, but if you want to 1 TX leverage with them, you will pay a small fee on your swap.
And that was really cool. We have actually hoped more people would do that. Kind of say, building on top of it, because we also said, hey, we have the protocol, let's innovate on top. That's why we did the fee. There we learned a lot. So probably we would do some things different, but it was the first attempt, and it's really amazing kind of what the DeFi Saver guys have built on top of it. Really new features that benefit the user,
Do you happen to know, maybe you haven't looked at this, but do you happen to know like per month or per year, how much are the front-end providers, including like DeFi Saver for just their Liquity function, like how much are they all making collectively?
Not top of my head
Yeah,
that I could give you accurate numbers.
Okay.
Why do you think if it's sustainable model for them, or
Yeah,
what are you
just curious. Yeah, it's just, are they making, a relatively small amount, or is it actually like a good business for some of them? Or
I think especially at the
early days.
early days, there were definitely some that were highly profitable.
Yeah.
But I would say, on average, it's not a business you can live from. Yeah.
Okay.
It's what we see. It's more and more. I guess it's done for social benefits. So I guess a good example of that is Bankless DAO is running a front end. Why?
Okay.
Because they were thinking of what cool stuff they could do to do cool stuff in DeFi, and they were like, "Hey, we like Liquidity. Let's do a Liquidity front end." So maybe one day it will be useful. And they spin up a front end. That was one of their projects for a while. So you end up with those like friend front end. I don't know how to call them. Where they're clearly not doing it because the guy was like, "Oh, we're gonna make tons of money building a Liquidity front end. Let's go, guys."
Right.
So I think this is right now. This is kind of how we get like quite a fair share of that.
And so for anyone who's watching this who thinks they might want to do it, what does the process look like? Is it like some sort of package that you automatically spin up some instance and do something, or is it like code but you decide where to host it and you have to like figure out how to?
So it's like this front end kit, as we call it, which is like literally a GitHub repo that gives you the minimal Liquidity website with like 2 modes and fetching all the data and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Then from here you can just like take it as such, host it, and you have like a minimal basic front end, or kind of build maybe more interface on top of it, or even more feature and ship it to your users.
But there are also newer options, and I think we need to innovate there because the user face is such an important part of it, and it's especially from regulators, it comes more and more scrutiny on this layer. So just recently saw a project, I don't remember, was it Engels something, a project which provides you like with a one-click solution, makes it really easy to spin it up. Right now you need on GitHub, you probably need to compile it, you put it on server, probably too complex for me. I really liked it to make it easy to run the front ends, or also running local front ends. I think this should be one-click solution to make the space resilient, and there is way too less attention to that, and people probably don't realize how fragile this is, and we would do the entire space a favor if we as an industry come up with more robust front ends. Or somebody runs also a front, you can run it on IPFS, somebody runs it on Dfinity, where they kind of can deploy and make it immutable, and it runs on several servers. Stuff like that.
That's really cool. I really like that model. And it's the sort of thing where, like, from my perspective, I've kind of thought about the front end question, and it just seems like if you look at those dynamics, there are many routes to decentralization winning. Like you can't really stop it because you can have local front ends, you can have these like incentivized things where many people run it. So I do think that there will be some conflict there, but it seems like a case where unlike say fiat-backed stablecoins where it's like, well, the lawmakers and regulators get to decide exactly what's going to happen. With the front ends, it's like, well, no, like the technologists will end up, being able to create things that people can use freely, and there's sort of nothing you can really do about that in a limit. Okay, cool. And then why don't we talk a little bit about the Liquity token itself and the fee sharing? What fees is it sharing, or how does that work? What role does it play?
So there is a Liquity token, the LQTY, which is mainly distributed through the emission. And it gives you technical access to the protocol revenues. So the protocol handles also everything autonomously. Protocol collects all the fees from the borrowing in LUSD, and for the liquidations in ETH. So that's the real yield part, on the LQTY token. So you get LUSD and ETH if you stake the LQTY in the protocol. And 100% of the fees go in the protocol and is distributed. Also it's conditions set in stone. Nothing can be changed.
Okay, wait. So you're saying you stake the LQTY, and you get ETH and LUSD, but from what?
So you get
From the two fees that the protocol takes.
Yeah, from
liquidations.
When a user open a loan, he pays the initiation fees.
Oh, the initiation
So that's your
fees.
LUSD. And when a user is liquidated, he has...
No, it's the redemption.
Oh, redemption, sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
Right, liquidation goes to 71.
Yeah.
So when the user is redeemed, there is a small fee charged in ETH.
Got it.
So these are
really sent pro rata to liquidity stakers. So, like, if there is a guy coming right now and borrowing a billion LUSD, let's say, and he pays 0.5% fees on that, it's really split as such as the time of the mint between all liquidity stakers. So if at time of the mint you're staking 2% of the liquidity at that moment, you're getting 2% of his fees.
Okay.
Really as straightforward as that.
And is that Liquity token that is staked, can it be taken or spent under any circumstances or no?
Oh yeah, I wish to tokenize it. I wish, man. No, that's the thing. It's probably one of the smallest little hack that could carry us a long way. So I know you deposit into a contract, you don't get a receipt token or anything, so it cannot be like restaken or use that as collateral for leverage or something like that. Really has to be like dedicated to staking.
Okay. But then, but can the tokens that are staked ever be taken by the protocol or no?
Oh no, it's not like a safety mechanism or anything like that. It's really like just fee sharing mechanism. So it's the main question protocol tries to answer is like, what is your share of the pie? And
so is there
that's the only question really.
Why even have them be staked? Why do you even need to deposit them?
Well, then you enter into complexity of you would need to airdrop to every liquidity holder the fees in real time, which is like a gas nightmare, or you still need to have them. It's a bit like distributing the EIP 1559 money on Ethereum. We decided to burn ETH simply because any other solution was horrendous from a UX perspective. You want to give a yield to all ETH holder? What do? ETH is a rebasing token now. Have fun with the integration.
Right.
You airdrop to everyone. Have fun with the gas. Everyone can claim. They will have fun with the gas. See, there is no good solution. It's a bit of the same here.
When you stake, is there any sort of lockup period to withdraw?
No, it's liquid.
Okay. So it's really just to make it so that there's a simple accounting mechanism to distribute fees to the liquidity token holders.
And to commit them in a way in the protocol to you commit them here so they're not like liquidity providing or whatsoever. Kind of makes sense to align incentives, so you're not like, I don't know, selling LQTY and at the same time getting your share of the revenue of the protocol, which would be a bit weird.
Well, but you can't, if you can withdraw instantly, then...
You can sell them when you're done, but you need to stay committed within the system to be exposed to the fees.
But how is that different from just holding the token?
Oh, it's different in the sense that you have a lot of people holding it that are like LPing or using it in other forms, It's like the added complexity, essentially.
I see. So what percentage of Liquity token is staked in that revenue split mechanism?
Oh, definitely a fair share, I think.
65%.
Oh, but why not 100? Are there other things you can do with it to make money?
29% is in circulation, so not all is in circulation, and the other part maybe it's not worth it because you hold only some. A lot is maybe on centralized exchanges which people use to trade.
Quite a bit. Most of it is liquidity related. Balances on centralized, on dexes. You have a bit more integrations for yield, but not too many yet.
Okay, and you said what percent is circulating total?
93% of the supply is circulating, I think, something like that.
Oh, okay, so it's almost all in circulation.
Yeah, it's almost on. I think it's 92 point something.
And so there's only a little bit of emissions left through that other mechanism. Okay, awesome. So what else? Anything else on sort of like the, from your perspective, big picture things that I should understand if I want to really grok Liquity?
Yeah, maybe to sum it up, just give some context to Liquity. Just also some numbers, because you mentioned, for example, the blue chip thing. Just that people understand, so blue chip was a rating of stable coins from A to F or so, and that was really cool, So Liquity LUSD got an A. I think only Paxos, which is a really cool setup, and Gemini got the same rating. I think that was really cool to see. That I think we have an awesome development team on DeFi safety. We are number 1 or 2.
Oh, cool!
Just from the security rating. And we are really battle tested, and I think the thing we could have done better is being probably more vocal. I think it's still surprising how we've been out there or the protocol has been out there for 2 years, and still I'm surprised when people don't know it. So I think just the people understand it a bit, and I think it's one of the top 10 DeFi stable coins. I think even from outstanding supply, I would say behind the DAI, and even up with Frex, just kind of the supply that is minted really against collateral. We are playing kind of with the bigger ones. Also, if you look at how much ETH we hold, we are one of the biggest ETH holders. DAI is bigger, always bigger. Of course, people see the TVL, but if you compare on apples and apples, so how much ETH do they hold and how much we, then they're maybe 2-3 times bigger. That gets often a bit forgotten, and just wanted to put that a bit in context, and and also give kind of the recognition to the team. So I wasn't there at the beginning, so I'm not patting myself, but you know, that's what drew me to the project, why I'm so excited and passionate. And often it gets a bit forgotten. So I think in the past we weren't so good in showcasing these things, and I think it's really a cool achievement what the team did. And by the way, we're 10 people. And cool. The cool part is we are 2-3 years around, still the original team. So these are just kind of things I think, hey, I really like it because it's something that's special, And just wanted to highlight also some of these aspects.
Is the team mainly in one place or all over?
All over,
All over, cool.
Mainly Europe.
Cool. And then, and so if everything is autonomous, what does the team do?
Yeah, good question. They do what they love to do, research new stuff and develop new stuff. You know, so in the meantime, we have the Chicken Bonds. That was a project. We are now working on a next version. So V1 will stay there, and it's pure and it's only on ETH. But a lot of people use now staked ETH. And we have also an idea for a new design, which has then a better peg. So really, the developer are working on that. And the other part of the team is working on the education and awareness of the existing system and preparing the new one. By the way, that's also a cool milestone. A lot of people don't know we are the third most forked protocol.
Oh, interesting.
Behind Aave and
Uniswap.
Or Uniswap, of course, and Compound or Aave. No, Compound, I think. So especially recently, I've seen a lot of people that took the Liquity design. And use it for staked ETH, for example. So a lot of forking have happened. So it's really a battle tested design that people just take to create stablecoins.
What do you mean for staked ETH? How would you use it for staked ETH?
Instead, for the collateral, you know, Liquity just takes ETH.
Oh, I see.
And now you can build the same system with a collateral that is interest bearing, so you don't have the opportunity cost. I understand that, but then there are also, I think, the people that say, okay, no, I want to have it really pure, Liquity is battle tested, I only trust that, you know, that's the only thing I'm willing to do with my ETH except holding it. So
Yep. Cool. So I'm curious for V2, but first, what are chicken bonds? I've heard this term. It's amazing branding. Every time I hear it, I'm like, that's the coolest sounding thing ever. But like, I honestly have no idea what they are.
Yeah, it's a bit more dense, I guess. They have a bit two perspectives from the user side. It's an auto-compounding yield amplifier LUSD. So it's mostly like yield opportunities on LUSD.
Okay.
But then we really build them in the perspective of them being a bit of the first trial. We want to generalize the model to other project. And so from the project perspective, it achieves essentially a capture and direction of liquidity where you need it to be. It's really like a bit of a yield game, essentially time-based for the users. But essentially they're all incentivized to play along if they want to make profit. And as they do so, they help the system accrue what we call a permanent bucket balance that is then used to support liquidity on the token. So that's really like the end goal of the chicken bonds, is to build a solid permanent liquidity bucket on your token.
Okay.
So in that sense, worked pretty well for LUSD because it attracted over $1 million of permanent liquidity for LUSD. And the bonders really depends of how do they fed, how well do they understand the system. But the early bonders especially were quite profitable. And now as the system matures, it's a bit more of a nuanced picture. But yeah, now we're seeing more of a second life of the system where BLUSD, the token it output, the yield amplifier LUSD.
The auto-compounding.
Yeah, auto-compounding too, yeah, right? It's turning into a very desirable collateral for other protocols. So they are looking to accumulate this in reserve essentially, because for them it's a wrapped yield amplifier LUSD. So essentially, if you like LUSD and you're fine with the added risk of the chicken bonds, because there are some, there is nothing not to love in BLUSD. It's like everything you like amplified. So yeah, like Gravita is using BLUSD as collateral, and a few other protocols are looking at that too.
But what are they? I still don't know how they work.
Well, maybe just kind of to frame it also differently. Chicken Bonds is built on top of the stability pool yield. Remember the stability pool? I deposit LUSD and it gets the yield. So it's built on top.
Okay.
Independent on top. And I mean, this yield is pretty boring. Everybody gets the same, You're just sitting there and you're getting the yield. So Chicken Bonds does two things. On the user side, it makes this yield much more volatile or gamified. Like in a poker game, based on your bonding and timing, you can get more of that yield or less. It's still the same yield, it's slightly amplified, but there's a game on the user side which makes it more degen, you could say. So the ones that played well get more, and so. And we can then explain how the bonding works. But that's the user side, still on top of the yield. And as you said, for the protocol, a bit like the house, if you play roulette, the house takes a cut and uses it for protocol-owned liquidity. Facilitates that, and while people doing that, they do the protocol a benefit that it gets a fee and it deposits it in a liquidity pool.
Okay.
So just
cool.
That's the frame. And now maybe you want to deep dive a bit into the dynamics. But I think it's important that people understand where it sits and what it wants to achieve.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah. But so then so what is the bond itself, or how does it work?
Go for it.
Oh yeah, just one addition before you can outline the detail. I mean, bonding was a big thing with Olympus, where you bonded and it went up and down, crazy.
I honestly, though, I didn't quite follow all that. So I've been a little bit, when people talk about like bonding and bonding curves and so on, my eyes glaze over a little bit. I don't quite know how that works.
Yeah, I just wanted, you can explain that, put it in front of that background, because people were used to that.
Yeah.
It was quite degen, and we tried to find a better mechanism of this bonding and how to reward users. And now I think you can best explain kind of the nitty-gritty details.
So yeah, I guess at the base level, bonding is just a transfer of two different asset types over time.
Okay.
So, projects give you their token if you give them ETH, and maybe they will drip it to you over the next 5 days.
Okay.
At the price of whatever. That's essentially Olympus bonding. So yeah, on our side, the protocol essentially is looking to accrue LUSD balances. So eventually it needs the user to kind of give it LUSD, and bonding is a mechanism ensuring that. And for the user, it's a bit off a bet, but with quite a high level of protection. So essentially it starts with creating a bond, where it's just depositing LUSD into a contract, and the user will get an NFT to kind of track, measure, recognize his bond. As soon as he's done that, he begins accruing BLUSD over time. And so it's really a matter of deciding when, he has accrued enough and the market price of BLUSD is interesting enough that he can claim them, and essentially, even if he was to sell them instantly, sell them for more LUSD than what was put in initially. So that's like the claiming process at the end of the bond. Now, what's, I guess, is the more interesting, especially compared to other bonding mechanism, is during the maturation of the bond. So when the bond is accruing BLUSD, the user can cancel his bond at any time. And so it means essentially living with the principal. Like, hey, I don't care about the BLUSD, you keep them, but you give me back my LUSD. So it really acts as we like these terms recently, as a principal protection mechanism where, the user has kind of very hard contract level guaranteed mechanism that says, okay, worst come worst, you lose your yield, but the principal is yours, essentially.
Okay.
So it's only yield being put on the table. But yeah, successful, profitable user would simply bond, wait enough time to have accrued an interesting amount of BLUSD compared to market price. And then from here, they have several strategies. You can rebond, as we call it. So claim your BLUSD, sell them for more LUSD than initially put in the bond, and go for another bond. You can go for LP strategies, even leverage the BLUSD as such. So now it's becoming increasingly more about essentially gaining access to BLUSD, which is a highly desirable stable by itself and quite in a limited supply. Because once you have BLUSD, you have access to interesting yield opportunities. Be it the LPs that are quite lucrative and very low risk. Leveraging it, it's also pretty good collateral and pretty lucrative, or just going for a rebound.
What are the properties of BLUSD?
So yeah, it's essentially a wrapper of LUSD in the sense that it's fully backed by LUSD, with a rising floor against LUSD as Chicken Bonds protocol accrues yield. So now the floor is around 115 LUSD per BLUSD.
So it's kind of like compound USDC.
Kind of. Main difference is it's also quite resilient. So it's not exactly as resilient as LUSD itself, because you need some infrastructure to claim and compound that yield of the stability pool. But even here, it's really made so that it's minimized. Like you can get rugged of the yield, but not of the principal. And everything is really optimizing for the sturdiness of it. And yeah, I guess the other is really convenience, because it's compounding the yield for you. And also because of how the system is designed, there is a yield amplification. So it's making more one BLUSD nets you more yield than just one LUSD instability pool, because there is this permanent bucket. It's around 1.3, 1.4, the yield amplification right now. So essentially, one BLUSD gives you as much yield as 1.34 LUSD instability pool.
Because the protocol holds some LUSD from the people that bonded and the ones that are still bonding. So all the yield of the system goes to BLUSD, but still some people in the system don't hold BLUSD, so the ones that hold get more than all the people in the system.
So if I have BLUSD, then there's so is the LUSD that the protocol has accumulated part of the stability pool?
Yet the protocol deposits most or all of its LUSD in the stability pool to get the yield. And in BLUSD, it's auto-compounded. It also takes the yield from the LUSD from the people that are bonding and puts it there. So
I just realized we might see a shift of the bucket from from the liquidity to stability pool.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of other parts. So how the buckets is done, how the amplification happens, and there's even a built-in functionality that the protocol can now shift funds into the liquidity pools and back to help the peg. So there's a whole thing around it. But to summarize again, it's really the users having a game, and I think that for me that was also very an interesting part. Why is it called chicken bonds? We didn't explain that. So you're bonding, and you have two options. So you can chicken out, by claiming your principal.
Got it.
Or chicken in to get the BLUSD. And that was the name. And why was it better as Olympus? Yeah, because you had this principal protection. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of, as I said, a game, and the money you put on the table is the yield. So it was a very fair and transparent game. And of course, if you played it well, you could make more yield than in the stability pool. If you didn't time it well, then you just lost your yield. And then there was the part where I learned the most is really this bonding position is an NFT. And I think we were one of the first in the DeFi ecosystem that pioneered these dynamic NFTs. So when you created the position, you had an NFT, an on-chain NFT, that was an egg. And based on your action in the system, the NFT changed. If you chicken out, you had a chicken that ran away, and if you chickened in, you had another NFT. So part of your action influenced the NFT you got at the end. And then depending on the size and the amount, how much you bonded, if you were LPing at the same time, you get rarity traits. So it was not just a simple JPEG NFT. I think it was really sophisticated because at the end, you could look at your portfolio. Imagine that as a TradFi user. You know, if you look at your portfolio in your bank, it's really boring. In Chicken Bonds, you could look at your portfolio and you kind of saw your portfolio as an artwork, you know, because they based on the action, you got different NFTs and trades. So that was just a playful thing, which was but really helpful at the end. You know, you think it's just a game, but I think that's how we work. We just like to have fun and being engaging while doing it. So, I mean, that didn't change anything at the system, but I really liked how people responded to that and how it helped us to tell the narrative.
And okay, so yeah, because when you said NFTs, I assumed you just meant like a boring, like technical NFT for the position. But
it was anyway a technical NFT.
Yes, but then you also added this image.
Let's play with that.
Yeah, that's cool.
So okay. Just to wrap it up from a higher level, I guess it's really like protocol has a need that requires some liquidity.
Yep.
And it wants to source it from users. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to go to the user, hey, give me ETH so we can pair it on our LPs and we get liquidity, you know? So instead, it's really thinking about, okay, how can we give to the user something they want? And as they get what they want, the protocol also achieve its objectives. Mm-hmm. So, you know, in that case, users, they have LUSD, they're ready to commit mid-long term to it to get bigger yield because they believe in it. So we give them something exactly for that. Hey, you're willing to like go a few months with LUSD, you probably will beat Stability Pool. And as they iterate through this process, they build this reserve that serves the protocol in the sense of developing, sustaining liquidity on LUSD.
So, so it sounds like, if I understand correctly, people are depositing LUSD, and then the LUSD is being put to work in a number of different ways. It's like put into a urine vault, and it's
there are a few components depending.
Put into the stability pool.
But it's mainly the stability pool, which is where we use the urn strategy, so it does that.
Oh, no, stability pool is B protocol.
It's B protocol, But the main thing is LUSD is put to work in the stability pool.
Yeah.
Okay. So LUSD in the stability pool, I had been imagining it just sitting there, but in general, that's not true. The LUSD in the stability pool is being put to work.
No. On the protocol level, it's in the stability pool. Yes. But instead of Chicken Bonds depositing directly in the stability pool, it deposits in the B protocol, which sits on top, or like a middleware, which does the auto compounding, which was already there. That's done that. So instead, it's not so easy to build this auto compounding in a good kind of not attackable way. We funnel it through B protocol, and then it's deposited in stability pool. And the stability pool is the same as we discussed. It's just all on top.
Okay, so the LUSD in the stability pool, no matter where it came from, it is just sitting there.
Technically sitting there. Yeah.
And then the B protocol is a Liquity specific thing that just does auto compounding for deposits in the stability pool.
Yeah.
And then where does the urine vault come in?
So the urine vault is there is some assets in the system that are supplied to a curve pool instead. So the LUSD curve pool essentially.
Mm-hmm. The liquidity, the protocol on liquidity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And urn is used here to just essentially, you know, the protocol is not interested in farming CRV or CVX token or stuff like that. It's just interested in depositing more liquidity into the LUSD pool.
Getting the yield and funneling it back. Yeah.
So it's exactly what the urn vault does. That's why it's harnessed.
Okay, and so it's like a urn LUSD vault that is it like sort of agreed upon that those urn strategies will all be like liquidity provision? They won't just like switch to other random things to earn higher yield because that would reduce the liquidity for the ecosystem?
So we kind of went around and talked with the various providers that were building that, and there is a form of agreement with urn that the vault would keep running. This is a vault really made for the LUSD curve LP. So, there is not many strategy you could go farm with this one. Like, which pool should we farm? Maybe the pool that is the one of the deposit token, you know?
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's quite limited, It was more a matter of ensuring they sustain it, maintain it over the long term.
But you see, it's a really nice example of composability, where immutability helps, but you also see a bit how you add additional risk and uncertainty. And I think that's what people like about Liquity, because you don't have them, because nothing can change.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to build on something that is immutable. It's not only the decentralization aspect, but you don't have these uncertainties which you need to track. And by using this protocol, I think it's nice that we could use it, but full transparency to the users, there are some dependencies, there are some additional technical risks, and Yearn has some more controls over their vault. So you need, if you use Chicken Bonds, you need to trust the Yearn system,
Okay, and so I deposit my LUSD, and I get BLUSD immediately when I do that.
So you accrue them.
No, I accrue them.
That's the bonding.
And essentially, you can claim them whenever you think you had them.
I see. So I can withdraw my LUSD anytime.
Yes.
But has the LUSD that I've deposited, is that put to work or no?
Yes.
It is.
That's only the stability pool creating the yield, which is then auto-compounded in the BLUSD.
I see. And you can guarantee withdrawability because it's just in the stability pool.
Exactly. So we really restrict the pending assets in non-yield source.
But then once I have BLUSD, that is redeemable for LUSD, which can be used in more flexible ways.
Exactly. So once you claim your BLUSD, you forgo your LUSD to the system, and the system can essentially distribute them in ways depending of the situation. So it needs to guarantee you the floor price on BLUSD if you want to redeem it. So there is a bulk of the LUSD being sent to the system that goes to the reserve, essentially. But there is a little surplus that goes to the permanent bucket. And this one can harness a bit more aggressive strategies when it comes to yield, because it's not used to guarantee anything to the user except yield amplification. So as long as we're sourcing yield on the permanent bucket, essentially this is fine, even if the principal assets are affected.
And why is it permanent bucket? Because it's a permanent liquidity. So the protocol can use this bucket to provide liquidity, because nobody has a claim on that part. All other parts, the bonds are secured with bucket, the BLUSD is backed by.
Is there a diagram for Chicken Bonds?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, because that's why I was cautious in going down that. That was a product, bringing that product to market because of its complexity.
Let's pull up. I just want to look at the diagram. I'm assuming we can
Yeah,
quite easily. Okay.
Should we
Chicken
take the
Bonds
one?
blog or
Here,
Yeah, I think
the primer.
Maybe the primer, could have some decent graph.
No, these are the NFTs. I see they evolve.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Oh yeah, here.
There we
the
go.
full
Maybe
one. The full bucket logic and where do they allocate assets.
So you have LUSD. Of course, you can also buy, but you bond. Once you chicken in, you get the BLUSD, and the LUSD is either put in the stability pool or the curve pool. And there you see the three buckets, but that's more the accounting. The LUSD that is bonding has its own bucket, because if people chicken out, they want to have their LUSD back. The reserve is backing the BLUSD and the value, the redeemability, and the permanent bucket, which is in the smallest, is the only one that can provide liquidity to curve. And there you have also the shifting functionality, which we said, depending on the peg, we can also say, okay, we don't need the liquidity, we withdraw it to support the peg, and then we move it in the stability pool, and you can move it back.
Okay.
But these three buckets are really more an accounting thing. And there you have the dynamic,
Sorry,
Oh, the BLUSD you can sell.
do you use the mouse to point things?
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can
Yeah.
try to summarize it in your own words, and then we see.
Yeah. So, well, I have one more question. Well, maybe many more, but so somehow this system is accruing profit, basically, and that's what generates the protocol and liquidity.
Yeah.
Yes. Where when this LUSD gets in the system and it's in the stability pool or the curve pool and there's rewards accruing, somehow most of that is going to the BLUSD holders, but some of it is going to like the system itself. Is that right?
Permanent bucket, as we call it.
So if people chicken in, claim the BLUSD, then the protocol takes a fee for that. Or not a fee, it takes a cut, and that's then the part of the permanent liquidity.
Okay. Is this diagram relevant as well or no?
Which one is this one? Oh yeah. It's I think it's to show you the different strategies you could have regarding chicken bonds and BLUSD.
Okay.
That's what I meant, this is built on top of the stability pool where everybody is the same, gets the same yield. And now you have different strategies you can run on top of the stability pool yield with BLUSD.
Okay.
So you have the bonder, you have the one that just tries to buy and sell BLUSD, and the third one.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me try to explain this. So you start by depositing your LUSD through a little chicken hand here. And then over the course of time, and so when you do that, your LUSD gets deposited to the stability pool only. And the chicken bond system is keeping track of the fact that you've had it deposited for a while. And so over time, you have the ability to you could either just withdraw, or like over time, the amount of BLUSD that you could convert your LUSD to goes up.
Yes.
And if you decide to chicken in, then you are converting your LUSD to BLUSD. It's not you're just like, it's not like you deposited 100 and now you claim 5. It's like, no, you deposit 100 and you claim, or you sort of trade.
Yeah, it's like a swap. You forgo your LUSD to the system in exchange for those BLUSD.
Got it. And what determines that like exchange rate?
So there is that's the chart you see below, essentially the BLUSD emission rate on a bond, and I mean it's heavy math and research. Essentially, the way it goes is, the bigger the bond, the more it accrues, and then it starts kind of fast and then plateau over time. So over the first few days you accrue quite a bit of BLUSD, but then it kind of evens out progressively over time, and targeting roughly 30-40 days.
The time when you can do it, if it's profitable or not, depends on the market price of BLUSD,
Yes.
BLUSD is undervalued, then probably it takes a long time until you're profitable. If BLUSD in high demand and the price goes up, then you are incentivized to claim it earlier, because you can make faster a profit.
Okay, so you deposit, and the amount of BLUSD you can trade for is going like this.
Yeah.
And then eventually you're like, all right, I've pretty much gotten as much as I have the patience to get. So here's where I'm going to chicken in, and I'll get this exact amount of BLUSD. Whereas if you waited like twice as long, you'd get a little bit more, but not that much more.
Yeah, you get it.
And there you have the dynamic. Now it depends also heavily on the market price. You only would chicken in if you get more than the $100 in LUSD in value of BLUSD. And then you have this kind of a very dynamic system.
And is the market price of BLUSD volatile, or because it's renewable for LUSD, so I would expect it to be pretty stable, right? Or no?
Well, that's the thing. It's there are people bonding, selling, buying, so it ends up being quite volatile. I mean, it's a quasi-stable coin, but it's not the up only you would expect.
Okay.
And that creates, the dynamic, as I said, like the poker table where people could ride. But it turned out, that was a learning. Right now it's very stable, so the dynamic really smoothened. And that was also a learning. You need kind of an interesting and volatile base yield, and probably the LUSD yield is too slow. I think this mechanism would be really great if you do that, for example, with your native token.
What is this weird report they have? Oh my god, where are they pulling data from?
So is this not really accurate?
No, it's accurate, but this is, I don't know.
Oh yeah, those things happen.
Some puking one there.
Sure. Okay, but so it's roughly stable, but it's fluctuating based on the demand.
Maybe take like a 1 month time frame, and you'll see what we mean. Well, you know, like for instance, last month it was a bit more volatile, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, floor price is around 115, 116 right now. So what's quite certain is that it trades always above floor price, or pretty much always. But then the premium against the floor price is more or less volatile.
Okay.
But it's quite stable. That's why I said I think the most interesting part is if you do it with a more highly volatile yield source, then there's more unpredictability, and it has a more interesting dynamic. Now the system has gotten very predictable, and the BLUSD price is close to the floor price. So I'm looking forward when projects are using this mechanism to, for example, bond their own token, which they issue.
Okay. And so then as a user, I deposit, and until I've traded in or chickened in, I can always just change my mind.
Yep.
But if it gets to the point where, you know, I've deposited for a while, and let's see, what time scale is this? We're talking about, in this example, we're talking about, you know, like 6 or 7 days is when this chart would sort of demonstrate someone chickening in. Is that common? Like a period of...
It was more than 30 to 60 days.
Oh, no, it's in weeks.
Oh, in weeks. Oh, got it. Okay. Right. So like 6 or 7 weeks. Okay, so you're chilling there for a long time, and then, or long time, and then eventually you're like, okay, this makes economic sense. I'll go ahead and make this trade. And then once you do that, and so I guess, why is that there rather than just everyone just trades in at, you know, roughly this exchange rate right at the beginning? Is it because this sort of gives you some amount, or gives the protocol some amount of people just putting up their capital and then deciding to not take anything from it, and so you just get free capital? Is that the main reason for this?
The free capital, low commitment for the depositors, because, you know, he's not investing into anything because he has the principal protected. And it's a way of like, essentially the whole system is kind of to gate access to BLUSD, you know, because from its very properties, BLUSD is quite desirable. It's backed, auto-compounded, yield amplified. So you need ways to capture essentially value on the path to BLUSD.
Okay, got it.
It's kind of how I say it, yeah.
Okay. And so then eventually, if you then trade into BLUSD, then your LUSD is now owned, it's all owned by the system. Sort of except for the fact that the BLUSD could be redeemed for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all owned by the system, but the system has like mandates it needs to ensure, one of which being enabling all BLUSD holders to redeem at floor.
Okay. And what is the floor? Is it 1-to-1, or
no,
it changes over
well,
time?
it goes up with the yield essentially. So it started 1-1, but now it's around 150.
Got it. And that is fundamentally the driver of like why it's attractive to hold BLUSD, is that it's meant to appreciate relative to LUSD.
Yes.
And then it's interesting that it's been going down. I guess that's because there are forces that could push it up faster than the floor grows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the premium, it won't go below the floor price because people would redeem then otherwise. But of course, the premium people are willing to pay.
Yeah. So another thing.
Because if you buy it, you know, you're buying into the future yield of the token, so it should be traded at premium. And
like you need to map it against LUSD if you want to have a better overview, because what happened is LUSD lost about 2% of the premium it used to have over that year. So essentially BLUSD is pretty much static / slightly up, but because LUSD is slightly down and LUSD is backed by LUSD, so priced in LUSD, when you look at it in USD value, you see a slight downtrend.
Okay. Okay, and so then once you're in BLUSD, then the underlying LUSD gets allocated basically across the curve pool via Yearn, but it's really just in the curve pool.
Yes.
And the stability pool. Okay, and then I understand.
So most is in the stability pool, and yeah, the pending bucket, that's the LUSD that people bond.
Yeah, so that's what
these are accounting buckets.
That's what they've put in, but haven't converted yet.
Yeah, so the system needs to have that ready. And it's only, as you see that the arrow up, it's only put in the stability pool.
Yep.
The same for the reserve. That's the portion that is backing BLUSD, also only the stability pool, earning the yield.
And
And
then
the
only profit from that ends up being available to be in this permanent bucket that goes into the curve pool.
The permanent bucket takes a cut at the time when you convert LUSD into BLUSD. Some part goes in the permanent bucket, and that can be used in the stability pool or for the liquidity. Usually it's in the curve pool. And now you see you have these 3 buckets, all provide yield, and everything goes to BLUSD. So that's in the amplification.
Got it. Okay, but the permanent bucket only grows during conversions.
Yeah.
From when you're going from the pending pool or when you're chickening in.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it. Okay, and then this arrow.
So that's the yield, the yield from the LP, but mainly the stability pool. So more than 90% is the stability pool goes to the BLUSD. So these are the yield sources of BLUSD.
Cool. Okay. Wow. Sorry if it was boring to go through all of that.
No.
I just really wanted to understand.
I mean, it also took us a long time, and I think also use it to wrap around your head. But I think that's really the interesting part working with Robert, the founder, because he comes up with these game dynamics which are now possible.
Yeah.
So he loves to design and lay out this game dynamics and then see what happens. So I also study a bit economy, and you have this microeconomics, where you study the behavior, and I think DeFi is so great that you could put out the rules and then see what kind of dynamic happens, and can you incentivize the people, can you start a system, and that was, as I said, a system designed that you can solve a pain point for the protocol, the liquidity, by providing this opportunity to earn more yield on your stability pool. But of course it's a bit a zero-sum game. Some will have more and some less. And by facilitating, enabling this opportunity, the protocol took a small cut and financed its liquidity like that. And because the cut is small, because you don't want to extract too much value directly from the people participating, is the liquidity captured is 1 million. And so that was the...
Yeah, and each protocol can really readapt to what they need. So we were talking a bit with Red and Chicken Bonds guys.
Yeah.
And I really like this idea where, essentially what they want to do, the main twist they want to do on Chicken Bonds, the same thing. It's a fork of Liquidity, so very, very, very close technical functioning. They want to capture a permanent bucket of GRI in stability pool, same thing. But essentially then they want to, because the token can be moved across chain thanks to the stargating, they want to use it as a reserve to essentially balance the GRI supply on each chain. Because you can mint GRI on each chain, but you can also bridge it.
The stablecoin GRI.
And so there might be discrepancies, where maybe someone bridged 5 million GRI to Arbitrum, and now you have, let's say, 10 million GRI on Arbitrum, but only 3 million were minted there because the rest has been bridged from other chains. So maybe they want to send some reserve there to be able to stomach any movement. So essentially the permanent bucket will be used as a cross-chain balance that gets teleported left and right to just click. But, even the balances of... So it was really building on top of the air, but same thing. They give to the user yield on the stable, they get a stable balance, and then they use that stable balance to grease the flywheel within the system, essentially.
But it's going back to your question you asked, what are the developers doing? And that was a way to come up with, the system is immutable, but how can we help the system with liquidity? So that's something we came up, and because it's immutable, but we are in a composable DeFi, that's something we could build and put on top of the stability pool and just see and let it play out.
Yeah, and I guess it's a good piece of DeFi irony to put it like the other day with Ed. I was saying, if you think about it, Chicken Bonds, they captured about 1 million of liquidity directly. And because of how the system is designed, you can attribute another 2-3 million of liquidity on the main LUSD pair on curve coming from Chicken Bonds. So if we're generous, let's say $3 million worth.
Okay.
Then more than a day and something ago, some guy fat-fingered, and he sent $11 million worth of LUSD 3CRV token to essentially an address that cannot be controlled, so he burned them. And so I was like, imagine that the whole brains of Liquidity came with this great idea, worked at it for like a year, did modeling, economic, whatever you want, pushed it, had success, attracted close to 100 million LUSD in the system at some point. Now it's lower, obviously, but so, you know, everything went well. It's like a good team, putting good effort, and whatever. And you get like 3 and a random guy fat fingering 12. It's really humbling, you know, in the sense that even if you do good,
do you know
like,
who that
you never
was?
know. There might be a rando that just misclick and has 4 times your impact, and that's DeFi, you know.
A very wealthy rando. Oh man, that is rough. That is rough.
I mean, rough and knife at the same time, because now we have a very strong protocol on liquidity on the LUSD Swiss CRV, which was the goal.
Yeah, but you know, it was still an achievement. And before that, I mean, how can a protocol sustain liquidity? And you know, that's what we wanted to try out, because otherwise you need to have incentives and put that in. And just, if you look at it from that perspective, it's really a cool design that kind of the protocol was able to bootstrap it through the users in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
You know, the million will stay there.
Yep. Yeah, that's rough though. Okay, cool. And so Robert came up with the chicken bonds mechanism too.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but what is it like when Robert is trying to come up with a mechanism? Like, what does he actually do? Like, the thing I end up doing is I pace back and forth for like 8 hours, and I like often design things on my head. Some people do it in conversations with other people. I can sometimes do that. What's it like when Robert is like coming up with like a new mechanism?
First, it's very exciting, but also stressful, you know, because he has so many good ideas. So and we try to wrap around the head around it. And I think for chicken bonds, I think it was after Christmas. He was in a train ride. I think he got stuck in a tunnel, and it was dark and kind of, if I recall correctly. And I think then he had this idea and presented it to the team, and then we took it from there.
Yeah.
I think he mostly comes with it. So I'm with him in the office. So then sometimes he comes the next day, and then he has the ideas, and then we start working on it.
Yeah.
But usually, I think the spark is just in his head.
When
I think
that's
the unique
alone, thinking about it,
capability to have this mechanism mapped out.
Right.
You know, and you don't have many people in the space that are able to just understand how this works, how the drawbacks are. It's so hard. I mean, chicken bonds, and now also in the new system, to get these things right. And that's why you see so little innovation. That's why you see 50 forks. And I would love to see some more innovation. So people tweaked it. But nobody came up since Liquity really with a novel CDB-based design, I would say.
Yeah.
I think because these capabilities are just so rare, and it's really, really tough to get it right. So if you do a new mechanism.
Yeah, that makes sense. My experience is that it's, in a way, easier than people think to come up with new mechanisms for things like this. And I personally believe, I could be wrong, but I personally believe that a big barrier is people not believing that they can do it. So they'll think about something for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, maybe they'll think about it for like 20 minutes, but then they'll be like, I don't know, and they'll move on. Whereas like if you just keep doing the sort of dumb thinking that feels like it's not going anywhere for enough hours, you'll end up starting to come up with ideas. And like if you do that enough times, you can prove to yourself that it's possible to come up with new mechanisms. This has been my experience, at least. It's like, I can think about these things and come up with novel mechanisms. I've done it many times, but like I didn't used to be able to, or at least I didn't used to believe I could. But just having done it enough times, now I have sort of the self-confidence to be like, okay, we need a new mechanism for blah. You know, I'm willing to just spend the time to do that. I'm just saying this out loud because for anyone who's like geeky enough to watch this conversation, like if you haven't done that and you're not sure if you could yet or not, I encourage you to try, because I think that like it is possible. But I think, like you're saying, it does require, I think the path to getting there is spending the time to like smoothen and sharpen your understanding of all the little different pieces that are available, you know, like the pieces in your current system, but also like the constraints of how smart contracts work and so on and so forth. And once you understand all the little pieces, and then you give yourself a challenge of like, could we have a system that has this other behavior or this other property, then Gesundheit, then I don't know how to say that in French, then your brain will start to come up with, the possible ways of doing that.
I think it's also a lot the persistence.
Yes.
Like with an entrepreneur,
yes.
You can have a good idea,
definitely,
but to stand up 20 times, and
yes.
I've seen now these cycles, and I say that's the stressful part. In hindsight, liquidity design and chicken bonds might seem obvious, but before there were 20 cycles or even
yes.
more, and dead ends, and just because you can map it out, and then it doesn't work here. So you kind of adjust the screw, and it works here right, and then it breaks here.
Yes.
And so you keep looping it. So you need to come up with it. Yes, you need to do it, but you need the persistence to do it 20 times.
Exactly.
And only then you have a system that works, which if somebody looks from the outside, it looks obvious. This decision makes a lot of sense.
Together, yeah.
But there's no straight way to this solution. So you have to get to this kind of persistence loops, with persistence through these loops,
Yeah,
exactly. And sometimes it's also, I feel like people get caught by the weight of the past, essentially. So, they wonder, we want to do a CDP or whatsoever. Okay, let's look at the good design. How should we do for the interest rate? Well, Maker, the biggest one, has been running 4 years with the governance voting on every single vote, interest rate and change. So maybe that's a good way. Let's do it like that.
Right.
And sometimes you get... At this point, I have no patience for this because I'm like, guys, this is obviously one of the worst design ever possible to decide on an interest rate. I don't care that the Maker guys haven't figured that out, or they know, but they don't want to change it. But if you look at it objectively, you map it against other options, it maxes out on the drawback and has no benefits. So literally anything you can try to compute that interest rate is probably better than the Maker system. But the result is most people will just fork the Maker system because they see it running for years and they think it's the way to go. That's what I mean by don't be afraid to think that Maker guys, they're not the king and the gods of DeFi, or even us. Probably there is a random somewhere behind his computer listening to us. It's like, I like what they do, but I don't know, the base rate computation is really insane. I could do 10 times more efficient. Well, go for it, mate. Probably if you think you can, you probably can. It's often a lot of self-censoring or holding too much respect. Yes, the Uniswap and the Curve and all of that of the world are amazing, but no, Aidan Adam is not a god. You can provide a better liquidity structure than he does. Rune is not the all-seeing visionary that has all the features of stablecoin figured out. Right. Same thing, they all have, they delivered something cool, but you can beat them essentially. You can, not necessarily at their own game, maybe even at another game, but needs to not be afraid to innovate. I think that's also where we lose quite a bit of potential.
It's not only afraid, you need to be willing and have a passion to exercise it, to really dig deep, because you say we tokenomics, and say, it's a look at it, I take it, but who's taking the step and why is this there? What are the drawbacks? Going back and kind of wrestling and with this concept, that that takes a lot of effort and sweat.
Yeah.
And I just feel, it needs to be your nature. I assume you like to do that, but I think a lot of people are just going, let's start building, let's solve that. Kind of every tangent that they take is not enjoyable. So you need somebody that enjoys to take these tangents, and then it can become better.
Yeah. But I will say, I think if you don't enjoy taking those tangents now, it doesn't mean you never could. I do think that if you come to believe that there is a path through the woods, even when things seem complicated, then you end up coming to enjoy that activity more and more. At least that was my experience. So anyway, just a plug for that type of thinking. Okay, so why don't we take one more break, and then why don't we talk about the V2 and future stuff?
Great.
Okay, sweet. All right, great. Let's talk a little bit about version 2. So maybe you want to start with what's the motivation for why a version 2 anyway?
Let's set the scene. Yeah. So I mean, with version 1 has been live for 2 years. It's ETH only. It has kind of innovated on the interest-free loans, managed more than 4.5 billion in loans. So far so good. But of course, you can always improve things. So let's start kind of also the feedback we got, for version 1. And there were 3 things in particular, which then also led us to think about how we can improve these 3 things. So one is people like to stake staked ETH or use staked ETH as a collateral. I mean, back in the day, staked ETH wasn't so popular, so it made a lot of sense, and it still makes a lot of sense to have ETH. But if you can only use ETH, you miss out on your staked ETH yield. The second thing is the peg, which sometimes can be not so easy, as we've seen, for borrowers, because you have the peg between 1 and 110. And the third thing, it's great to have this decentralized stablecoin, but as we also touched on, it really depends on the borrowing demand. So in a bear market, there is not much supply, so we have a bit the limitation on the scalability of these systems. DAI and Frax don't have it because you can just mint against other stablecoin. So these were the 3 things we want to improve with V2. And let's first put it straight. So V2 is a new system with a new proposition and maybe also a slightly different target audience. V1 will stay there and has its purpose for kind of just having ETH as a collateral, being battle tested and having its properties. And with V2, we create also a stablecoin and a borrowing system and some things more on the basis of staked ETH. But we do that with a not completely new approach, but a totally different approach than Liquity. With Liquity, we said it's a CDP-based system, so people borrow and have their trove or position, and then the stablecoin is created. So it's borrow first, and then the stablecoin comes in. With Liquity V2, we start with a reserve-backed system. So first there is the stablecoin. People can directly mint and redeem by depositing staked ETH. And once the stablecoin is there, on top, kind of as a second thought, the borrowing comes. And this has very important implications. So with the CDP-based system, the borrowers take care of the volatility of ETH, because with the liquidations. But that makes it not so scalable. With the reserve-backed system, the protocol holds all the ETH and now has a long exposure, and we need to talk about that. So that's a difficulty, how you handle that. But you can more directly mint and redeem, so it's more scalable. And just to add on that, and so that's more the technicality, but what are now the benefits or the product? So there are 3 main things. So with the new stablecoin then, the new stablecoin should have a much better peg because you can directly mint and redeem. It should be more scalable in the way, not scalable that we say we're still limited by ETH, staked ETH, but not so tightly limited by the borrowing demand. We still need the borrowing demand to mint. So that's on the stablecoin side. Then we have still we plan to have the interest-free borrowing. So to keep that proposition, maybe with an even higher loan-to-value ratio, you can leverage up. And then as a third new product, you will have the option to take on. We have an attractive leverage product, which gives you like a perpetual dynamic leverage, which has the nice proposition that you can't be liquidated. You have a downside protection, and which don't have ongoing fees. And then another interesting part that all the other projects that have now forked Liquity, we've seen a lot of forks that just took the system and replaced ETH with staked ETH. That's fine. But the system won't have all of these products and the benefit. And one interesting benefit is, like with USDC, USDC holds all the reserve assets. So it's also kind of reserve-backed. And they put it into treasuries and get 5%, and all the stablecoin holders get nothing. So now in our case, we have the staked ETH in the reserve, which is earning yield. So you can also put this yield to work and give it back also to users. So for example, you can direct the yield to the stablecoin. So you have then a native yield from DeFi, which you can give the stablecoin holders. So to sum it up, with V2, we plan for ETH believers, so staked ETH holders, create an attractive product suite. Think of like your staked ETH bank, where you get a stable coin, where you can borrow, you have an interesting leverage product, and you earn interest on your stable coin. These all together, that's what we are aiming for with V2.
Cool. All right. Exciting. I have a guess about where this could be going, but I'm very curious to know. So
anything to add, or?
I mean, it's a vast topic, V2, yeah. But,
yeah.
No, I like to present it from a high level of essentially, I think this is how people resonate the most with it. We target something slightly less resilient than Liquity, and it's still a bit in design phase, but vastly more scalable. And yeah, I think Micheal covered it most, like the main thing being liquidity model, being quite different, so the peg should be more sustained. And because now you have a bit of a double product with both the borrowing product and the leverage product, you have more lever for growth essentially, and maybe less situations where, you know, when ETH price is puking for 12 months straight, it's really hard to find people, hey, you want to borrow on your ETH? It's really counter-cyclical in those moments.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, sweet. Well, let's talk about how it works.
Yeah.
Maybe start with a high level outline of the leverage product, since that's like a new piece that I don't know about yet.
Yeah. Okay, but maybe just an addition. I mean, we have seen reserve-backed system. So you know, these are the two designs, CDP based. And reserve-backed Engel is a prominent example.
What is?
Engel protocol with AG Euro.
Okay.
But the big difficulty is, how do you hedge the volatility of ETH? Because the protocol holds the ETH now in this reserve-backed system.
Right.
That was always difficult, you know, to find a market for that, and that's why most of these protocols also pivoted. So it's not that we came up with this design, but the challenge is really hard to go with this design because the protocol needs to hedge itself. And that brings us to the leveraged product, because you imagine people are minting, so depositing staked ETH, and then against that you can mint a stablecoin. So in the reserve you have this staked ETH, which is backing the stablecoin, but the staked ETH is volatile. So now the system needs to take care of that. You know, if it goes up, it's easy, but what if it goes down?
Right.
So at the end, what happens, you can think of it also in that way, that you have the staked ETH. You make one part of the staked ETH stable, that's backing the stable coin, and the other part, it's getting more volatile. And this part, it's where the leverage product comes in. A lot of people ask, okay, where do you get the leverage from? The protocol itself has naturally, because it's also over-collateralized, a leveraged position. You know, it has the staked ETH in the reserve, and some additional funds, the surplus we call it, which is the leverage position. And now you can use the funds in the reserve to provide the leverage to the people that are additionally collateralizing the reserve.
Okay.
That's the first question. So there the leverage is coming from. So why is that interesting? The protocol anyway has this leverage. Now you can provide this leverage, outsource that. So if you want to get rid kind of the exposure to other users, and they can benefit from it. And there you see already one proposition of this leverage product. You don't have ongoing costs. You don't need funding rates and stuff, you know, from perpetuals, because the protocol has this leverage. It's dynamic, it's pooled, everybody has the same leverage. So that's maybe a bit the downside, but you can benefit from that. And you can't be liquidated, you know, because it's not a leverage against a borrowing position. So that's the second interesting part. And the third part is then that you have a downside protection or insurance. So how do you get into this product? You deposit, for example, 10 ETH. That's your principal. And then on this 10 ETH, you get the leverage. Let's say leverage between 1.5 and 3. So you're taking part of this pool of this leverage that can go up or down. And because you are insured, your principal is insured from the downside leverage. So not from the dollar value, but kind of it's insured that you should keep 10 ETH. You know, if it goes up, then you may, if you just hold staked ETH, you just have 10 ETH. And if you have leverage, you maybe get 15, but it can go down to 5 ETH. So you get also this protection. Maybe just to close on that. And now you're buying this position. It's like a bet on the future of ETH, of staked ETH. Because you have some protection and these nice properties, you should be willing to pay a premium for that. So, you know, to open it, you pay 2 ETHs as a premium, which is then collected to also provide the insurance. That's how you get into it. Then you can hold it, and you kind of get a guarantee that on the secondary market, you should be able to sell this position for 10 ETH or staked ETH. And or you have the option to immediately withdraw, but then you get just kind of the current value. So you would realize your downside on the leverage.
Okay. So, okay, I definitely don't understand that yet, but let me see if I can ask the right questions to get myself there. So, so if I go to the protocol and I deposit 10 staked ETH in order to mint however many stable coins, then the protocol now has this 10 staked ETH, and it needs to like hedge that position, right? You're saying,
because it wants to stay over collateralized, and this over collateralization, that's need to be a healthy ratio, and
right,
and there the leverage product comes from.
And so like it, I mean, in a sense, it just needs to stay 100% collateralized, right? It's like as long as someone can redeem the stable coin for, you know, for $1 worth of ETH or staked ETH, then we've gotten what we need. But so, okay, so does it like trade half of my staked ETH for like, can you walk me through like how does it construct the leveraged position?
Yeah.
Or the hedged position, I should say.
I think there's a bit of a mix-up where you like the borrowing and the hedging are really like separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess this is maybe where
I'm trying to connect like the minting and redeeming to the hedging. Yeah. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So, think of the stablecoin. It's a liability side. Then on the asset side, you have the part of the there's only staked ETH in the protocol that is backing the stablecoin, and then you have this surplus, this over collateralization. Let's say 200% or 170%. So 100% is backing the outstanding stablecoin supply, and then you have some additional staked ETH for the over collateralization.
Well, where does that additional come from? If I minted by depositing 1-to-1,
it's coming from the hedge product, you know. So at the beginning you bootstrap the hedge product, you have a surplus, and then you can start to mint, and you always need to make sure that it stays over collateralized. And for that purpose, the protocol sells this leverage, so not the hedge product, this leverage product. Yeah.
Okay. So
then you have a natural leverage, because if you now you don't mint and redeem the stablecoin, but you're in the leveraged use case, you also deposit your staked ETH into the surplus pool, and then you get the exposure of the reserve, which is backing the staked ETH. You know, that's then your leverage that's already in the protocol, because all the leverage product holders are just kind of in the okay. Let's start again.
We have to find one piece that I can get first, and then we can build on top, because like they're all like interconnected, and I'm not getting it yet. So, okay. So let's start with we'll go back to how the leveraged product works. So if I want to, I assume as a user, if I want to use the leveraged product, I have staked ETH and I want to lever up on it, right?
Yeah.
So I take my staked ETH and I deposit it into the protocol, presumably. And then what happens from there?
you just deposit, and then you are part of the whole protocol leverage. So let's say in the reserve backing the stablecoin, there are 100 staked ETH, and in the leverage product 50 ETH.
Okay.
And now you add an additional 10 ETH in the leverage product, so we have 160.
Yep.
So now the 100 in the reserve provide you the leverage. If ETH price doubles, the ETH from all leverager doubles, but also the reserve. So the protocol can give you part of this leverage for free, you know. That's the easy part if it goes up. So that's you have the inherent leverage in the protocol. That's why you don't need to pay ongoing fees, you know. You just participate. By participating, you also participate in the downside. And then there comes in the protection, which kind of helps you that you only are exposed with the principal and not with the leverage principal.
I see. Okay.
How would you summarize it in your own words? So we don't need to dance around it the next time.
I'm trying to figure out maybe this might be misinformation, but like it's almost like the entire pool of value is like one giant CDP that people are part of, except that's not quite right, but like because you've separated out the value that's deposited for minting the stablecoin and the value that's deposited for having the leveraged position. Okay, and so in order to get leverage, you just deposit. You don't need to like borrow something and go buy more of something and whatever. Just by depositing, you are then participating in like the leveraged upside or downside exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And maybe that's a good picture. Now let's think, in the reserve-backed system, there is one big trove and the protocol holds that. And now it takes the volatility of ETH and says, okay, one part is stable and that's backing the stable coin.
Yeah.
But the volatility of that part, we give it to the other part that is over-collateralized and not backing. So they're getting a more volatile staked ETH.
Yeah.
And the protocol keeps kind of the stable staked ETH that's backing it. And naturally, by kind of giving the volatility or the leverage then to the other ones, they are part of this leveraged pool position.
Incidentally, I think that this is maybe closest to the original stablecoin idea that Vitalik randomly mentioned in the Ethereum white paper than any other design that has existed so far. Random tidbit.
Cool.
So basically then, okay, let me just wrap my head around that for a second. So that means that like at any time I can come and redeem the stablecoin for modulo fees or whatever, like exactly $1 worth of ETH, right?
Yeah. So you have a good peg, you have a primary market liquidity. Yeah. So think of it like USDC, you know?
Yeah. So I can issue and redeem for $1 worth of ETH. And then so then basically like all of the leveraged staked ETH holders, as you said, are, you know, their positions are growing and shrinking in a leveraged way, similar to one another, right? There's no differing amounts of leverage you can have. You're just part of this leveraged pool.
It's a system leverage.
Yeah.
And the leverage is free.
Yeah.
Or you don't have to charge them for it.
No.
Right. Okay.
And you can't be liquidated, you know? It can't be liquidated if you're part of this pool.
Okay, so I feel like I'm starting to get it. So let's talk about this mechanism of you know, if I achieve leverage through this system. You've said something about how like that's you know, maybe there's less risk than an ordinary leveraged position for some reason. Can you explain like why? Why is there less risk than if I were to just I don't know, go borrow some stables against my staked ETH and go buy more staked ETH? Or did I misinterpret there?
No, I mean there's still the possibility that you create leverage through borrowing. Mm-hmm. Then you have to control about the leverage you have.
Right.
But you are also exposed to liquidations.
Right.
So it's and the new product is much more set and forget.
Okay.
So I think it's also more suited to people that have staked ETH. And it was kind of just too worrisome to care about liquidations, to have now this additional exposure on the up and also on the downside. So I think there is where the new product's coming in. I want to make the bet. I want to have the upside. I don't want to be liquidated. I don't want to pay ongoing fees. And I want to have a bit of a downside protection that I say, okay, I still believe in staked ETH. I want to make this bigger bet, but I'm taking not the full risk of the downside.
And how does the downside protection work?
So when you open such a position, you pay a premium for it because you get this leverage and the downside protection. So people are like collectively protecting each other. And of course, I mean, you make the math and you say if everybody's going in and going out, ETH price halves and everybody's going out, probably the pool is not big enough.
I see, but the pool comes from the fee that you pay when you open the position.
Exactly, or for example, the surplus that the protocol has accumulated.
And then in what way mechanistically is that pool of capital used to offer that downside protection?
Yeah, so we call it, these are subsidies.
Okay.
So you need to make sure, I mean, this product caters to people that hold staked ETH and won't hold it, so want to have leverage. So you want to reduce the amount of subsidies you need to pay over time. And when can you benefit from these subsidies? It's in the case when you say, now I want to sell the position at my principal value. So what happens, usually you put it on the built-in secondary market, and if ETH price has stayed the same, usually you should get your principal and some of the premium. Because if somebody bought kind of this bet on the future of staked ETH, you would be willing to also pay a premium, more or less. But now if the price goes down, somebody might not be willing to still pay you the principal, you know, because maybe the value, it was 10 ETH and now it's 5 ETH. And they pay you some premium on top of that, but it's 6 ETH. It doesn't give you back the 10 ETH. So then you can list it on the secondary market. After some timeout, if nobody buys it, then kind of the downside protection kicks in. And it's like a reverse auction. Now the protocol starts subsidizing the position until it finds a buyer or until the value of your position is 10. So you could exit then the position at 10. So you have always, as a holder of this position, you have two options. Either you sell it on the secondary market. If you get your principal, fine. If you don't get it, then the downside protection kicks in. Or you say, I want to get immediately out, but you can only get immediately out without the downside protection. So the downside protection subsidies take some time. So that's the caveat to it.
So you're saying you can sell your position, your like leveraged staked ETH position, because is it tokenized? Is that how you can sell it?
Yeah, but it's an NFT. Because it has unique properties, so you can't, it's not fungible.
Oh, okay. Why is it not fungible? Because it sounded like everyone's was the same.
Because it depends of when it was opened. Every position is specific, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a liquid leverage token.
So you started at 10 ETH, now a week is over, and kind of the initial value has dropped to 7. And if I open now again and one for 10 ETH, it's still worth 10 ETH, you know, so you have kind of the size and the current inherent value, which you can claim at any time, is different for each position. But every position has the same leverage because it's part of the pool. Just kind of how big it is and what is the current value, which now it achieved over time, being part of this pool is different.
Okay. Okay, and so if you then go to trade out of that leveraged position by like selling that NFT, there's some way in which if it doesn't immediately clear at a certain price level or something, then after some period of time, that pool of like fee capital can somehow be used to like, there's like a floor price, like a Dutch auction kind of thing or something?
Like the inherent value is increased of the position until it reaches the principal value. So ideally, okay, I paused that.
The principal level meaning like the level that you initially put in?
Yeah. So
in
if
dollar
you
terms?
No, not in dollar terms.
In ETH terms.
So, yeah. Dollar terms is really hard, but the problem we like to solve is you have staked ETH, you're happy with it, but you wouldn't go on the leverage because you're afraid that you take this additional leverage on the downside, so you'll end up with 5 ETH.
I see.
So there, we try to dampen that, to say, hey, you can get more exposure, and together, the ones that want to exit, so the people is catered to ETH believers, and the protection helps the ones that need to exit or want to exit. But if you think of it that this is a system for staked ETH believers that are in there and are in there for the long term, you can help those that need to exit, but you only need, the subsidies for the ones that want to exit, and you have different levels. For the ones that aren't kind of below the principal, you don't need it. So you only need it for the ones that are below. And then you only need to, for the ones that want to exit, it's still sometimes better. Okay, I'm negative, but I hold because if I open up a new position, I have to pay it again. And if I'm long and I think, hey, it will go up, then I stay. So you don't need the subsidies. And in case there are some that want to leave, then you only need to subsidize until you can sell it. So maybe not even the full value, because somebody buys it below for 9 ETH because he thinks, hey, that's a valuable position, I get that cheap. So that's, I think, that the two innovation, how we want to reduce the cost for hedging by catering to the right people and reducing the amount we need to pay for the hedging.
Okay, all right.
But, ultimately, to be fully transparent, the protocol is really dependent on the user, and the scalability depends a bit also on the demand of this product.
Yeah.
There's no miracle.
You won't know until it's out there. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the experiment, but we think it's fully worth, because I think, hey, this space is really full of disbelievers, and that's a really interesting target group, and it's a product for people that think ETH goes sideways or up. Yeah. This system doesn't make sense. People wouldn't go in there if they think it only goes down.
Right.
But now you can build a collective of these people that have this belief and cater really interesting products to them without extracting value. So, the ones that want leverage get the leverage and some protection. The ones that want to borrow, the stablecoin owner gets the yield. So kind of the protocol is built on this belief that ETH goes sideways or up. And that's the base assumption. But I don't know a better asset than staked ETH, And it just serves to these people that have staked ETH and haven't done anything and would like to have this option. So that's kind of the narrative behind it. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, let me try to then, and I guess there's maybe still another borrowing component that we haven't talked about yet. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we talked about is the stablecoin, directly mint and redeem, better peg.
Yep.
Then you have this set and forget leverage,
yep.
which you get out of that. So this needs to be neutral.
Yep.
And that's what I said. Now you start with the stablecoin.
Yep.
And on top, you can build now a borrowing proposition still with the CDB based, with the interest freeness, and maybe even a higher loan to value, because now, you can liquidate against the reserve, or there is a stability pool, but I don't know if you want to go into the weeds. There are several backstop which make sure that the protocol doesn't get under collateralized, because everybody does the math and says, okay, if you start and it only goes down, there is no miracle, and all together take some assumption, but at least it can't like blow up and everything disappears. The worst case that can happen is that this protection gets fully depleted, and maybe then you lose some of the protection in really extreme cases. But there are like several things that we make to make sure this doesn't happen. So maybe I quickly touch on that. So there is the idea of a stability pool, so you can stake your stablecoin. Hey, but the reserve generates yield. So let's distribute that to the stablecoin holders, so they have a native yield on their stablecoin. That's something that the CDP-based system can't do, because the yield belongs to the
yield
borrowers.
from the staked ETH?
No, the yield from the minter and redeemers in the reserve, which is backing the stablecoin.
Oh, okay.
And if you do that, you earn something, but you also have a function. That's everybody in the system has a function.
Yeah.
So you earn some yield, but it's also a backstop. If there is collateralization goes down or nobody buys this position, then these stakers are the first one that come in, like a bit the equity holder in this system. So that's another guarantee, and then you have another guarantee just to make the system more resilient. We can't kind of hedge every risk out, but we can reduce it. That we say, under this assumption, if we believe in this ETH price, we are pretty sure it can work out, and I'm maybe better off if I borrow or leverage through this system. And that's kind of like a public good we put out there for people to use, and where people can meet to benefit from each other.
Cool.
It's like with a marketplace for staked ETH holder to provide to each other such products and secure these products.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, and so then are you saying that like the system can also mint the stablecoin and lend it in the sort of more normal CDP way if someone comes and deposits staked ETH as collateral in like a private CDP that's not part of the overall system?
Yeah.
And so it's basically two methods of issuance are available, but the token is fungible regardless of how it's issued. Okay, and then it's redeemable in either way. You can use it to repay the loan, or you can use it to redeem with the reserve. Yeah. If the reserve gets fully depleted, just hypothetically, then it would kind of be back to like Liquity 1.0 effectively, where there would just be like the CDPs remaining, and those sorts of mechanisms would be in play, I would assume.
Yeah, and there all the iteration come in place. The complexity. How do these ratios need to be? How are these situations handled? That's really also the difficult part, and that's why we also already got a bit public. I mean, we are still conceptualizing, having a prototype, doing modeling, doing pricing, but it's a new system and it has a different risk profile. So we rather have more people look at it, challenge us to get the economics right, to also make sure that the products are appealing to achieve that. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so let me just try to say one time overall, we don't have to go in all the weeds for version 2. I think this is like a good level of detail, but just to make sure I'm correct on the high level, and then we can wrap up pretty soon after that. So, okay, so basically, you have the sort of Liquity 1.0 mechanism where people can deposit, but instead of ETH, it's staked ETH, and you can borrow against that. People creating their are they so-called troves, presumably, or I don't know, whatever, CDPs. But then you have this other mechanism where people can, and this mechanism would be on a day-to-day basis, as long as there's capital in the reserve, would be responsible for maintaining the peg, where you can deposit $1 worth of staked ETH and get one stablecoin. You can redeem one stablecoin and get $1 worth of staked ETH. And then the way that you can guarantee that you always have $1 worth of staked ETH for someone who wants to redeem from the reserve is you have sort of what's been deposited by minters and then what's been deposited by leverage seekers. And for leverage seekers, they would do this because it's a way to get leverage without having to pay the cost of, borrowing, like ongoing interest to borrow on, Compound or Aave or whatever. Or for that matter, just like even a Liquity Trove position. Although, no, that's not true because that's already just a single fee. But in any case, it's a way to get leverage where you're not paying ongoing interest and there's no liquidation. So basically the thing that you're at risk of is, if this is what was deposited by, it's not quite right, but roughly what was deposited by the minters, and this is what's deposited by the leverage seekers. If this, if the total pool of value goes down to the point where it's like, there's basically zero left for the leverage seekers, then like all of that value would be available for redemptions, and the leverage seekers would have lost like all of their value. Except that there is like a mechanism that sort of dampens that a little bit. When you open a leverage position, some portion of that capital is set aside that still a little bit fuzzy on the details, but like basically if you want to exit that leveraged position, then that capital can basically get offered to you to help make up the difference, so that you at least have like the original amount of staked ETH that you deposited. I guess I feel like I understand the big mechanisms. One thing though I still don't quite get on a high level is how can there be no liquidation or any whatever type of mechanism? Like if that total pool of capital, setting aside for a moment the CDPs, if that total pool of capital is just going down and down and down in value, I guess you're saying that you incentivize more people to open leveraged positions by lowering the cost of opening that position, maybe even possibly paying them, although
And I don't think we go up to the
not sure.
premium, but yeah,
Maybe no.
very favorable terms.
But what if just no one wants to open a new leveraged position? Like it's just like it's a crazy blood in the streets week. Everyone's like, you know what, maybe just not this week. And it's just going down in value. What happens if you end up below 100%? Or can that never happen for some reason?
Sure. I mean, what you have then, you have like a secondary and a third mechanism, which makes sure that we never get to that point. But that's what you said, it's not as resilient anymore. If we launch and ETH goes only down, I mean, there can't be a miracle, then you can't make it up, and then you make sure you have a graceful wind down. But kind of in the first scenario, you have, for example, people that stake the stablecoin, got some yield, but they also committed, if we have this scenario, they will start backing it. We could use their stablecoin to buy these positions and open up.
How does the graceful wind down work? Let's just cover that, and I think then we'll be good.
Yeah, I think there we need the more technical one, because you need to understand all these mechanisms. There's a third one, and then you need to have the whole dynamic. I think we need to keep that for another time.
You got the gist, so that the way I would describe it in terms of risk is, it's quite funny when you think about it. Somehow Liquity V1 managed to enable you to leverage ETH without assuming any ETH exposure. Every price risk related to ETH is pushed on the borrowers. So you have a protocol where like $800 million worth of ETH are leveraged, and the protocol takes absolutely $0 worth of ETH exposure.
Right.
So ETH can go 50K, can go $2. At the end of the day, Liquity will liquidate and will be over collateralized.
Right.
But this protocol, to scale a bit better, and especially when it comes to enabling users to directly swap ETH in and out of the stable without having to go through an AMM, and then assumes some ETH exposure, because you do understand that if you come to the protocol right now and dump ETH to its face, the protocol gives you stable.
Yeah.
Now the protocol at least has your bag of ETH as exposure and needs to stomach this in the market.
Yeah.
So this is where most of the new risks come from, because now, of course, you have a price chart of ETH that could destroy the protocol. The question is, what is this price chart? Because if it's ETH going to $2 and staying there for 5 months, I think we can work with that,
Yeah.
But if it's ETH going to 1,200 and staying here for 1 day, well, we saw that happening in the last 6 months already, So it's very likely that it could happen again.
Yeah.
So it's really a matter of like, where do you draw the line, essentially?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Very cool. All right. Awesome. Before we wrap up, do you guys have any other things you'd like to share for me or the viewers?
Yeah, I guess we can touch quickly on the collective. It's not directly related to Liquity. It's more my own adventure, I guess.
Okay.
Not just me. I'm with a few friends on this.
Okay.
But it's it's still in the same mindset overall of it's a bit of a side problem you run into when you're building, So at Liquity, one of the problem we realize is trying to build good, healthy protocols that are sturdy and well designed. But then you still have the game of getting them adopted, used, recognized, integrated across DeFi.
Yep.
And that's been something I've been doing quite heavily for Liquity over the last since I got hired. But the vision essentially goes like this: it's actually hard to grow alone as an immutable protocol, So to put it the other way around, my job would be 10 times more easier if there were 4 other stablecoin as resilient as Liquity. Because then we'll go together and do the resilient stablecoin full pool, and we'll do all kinds of joint things together.
Okay.
Like right now, when we want to do something joint with another project,
It's essentially one of lower resilience. So it's kind of, we have to kind of take the hit on this. So yeah, with that perspective overall of, to put it simply, the more you try to do a healthy, sturdy protocol, the less firepower you tend to have for growth. If you put it the other way around, we all understand that you want to attract tons of TVL. The best thing to do is print loads of your token, give them to your user, maybe don't even give them directly, you give them an escrow token over 6 months that is actually an option that they can convert to your token, depending, like Ponzi-nomics all around, so that you can give a lot without giving so much, essentially. But this doesn't really hold well with the vision of, it's been something resilient, sturdy, code we cannot change. So there's a bit of a tension, essentially. The more you do things right, the less firepower you have to promote those beautiful designs. So that's kind of how we see the collective as a way to resolve that unbalance. So call it the unfair advantage for immutable projects. Because it's really like giving support spontaneously to the projects that are to the highest level of resilience, essentially. The vision of first helping them grow, so the Liquity, but also Cat in the Box, Juicebox, and tons of others that are matching or very demanding criteria. And then hoping that over the long term it creates an incentive to go immutable. Because now you know that the collective is here for you, essentially. They will see us perform over the next few months. And I hope that our results will speak for ourselves to the point that I will be quite happy maybe 6 months, a year from now, if someone decides to go the immutable route, and that on his decision sheet, one of the plus side is, yes, marketing will be hard, but we'll have the collective with us and support liquidity, awareness, proposal, whatever is needed. So yeah, it's kind of.
But immutability is the key criterion to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's a criteria also because we have limited resources, so we need something clear as to how to allocate them. Not based on favoritism or I like your design, but yours a little less. So at least here we have something like black and white. But the vision is also to help projects walk their path towards immutability. It's just that they won't get free support if they're not immutable. Like the free support part is really focused on the immutable project to really make sure we develop this unfair advantages, incentives of being immutable.
And I mean, what's a DeFi Collective? It's a non-profit association, so where people can gather. And we already touched on it, everybody likes public good, but public goods are dependent on people supporting it. And I think that's what the DeFi Collective wants to do, that we see more of these things, but which also need help. And I think it's like leveraging Brice not only for us, but kind of for the ecosystem and people like that. So the idea would be really that people say, hey, I like that, or protocols, I mean, they need support, the brains, maybe assets. So that this is a place where we can share resources, which then can be used across different protocols to really bootstrap that. And I think that has been really missing. Everybody works on its own, and kind of this somebody, the helping hand, that especially the protocol that want to do the right thing in a DeFi way, in an immutable way. They have the least resources. So I think that's something you would like to counterbalance. And I think it would be really great if kind of the knowledge and expertise you have built can be harnessed by more projects.
Yeah, it's not just sharing resources. Really, a big part of it is sharing expertise, knowledge, collecting the builders of immutable stuff together, and really like realizing that it's a different path. As soon as you build immutable, you have different needs. You think about different things. You need different expertise. And the problem is right now it's absolutely underserved. So maybe another kind of share it for the collective, but another insightful experience for me was seeing Liquity when I was working on the V2. Went around to ask for agent-based modeling. And you would think that, okay, like chat of the space come with a new protocol, we got money, give us like the best brains you have, let's work on those models. And the result was going around all the offers, essentially, not one that was like to the level of what Liquity needed for its V2. So, kind of, it's still an idea for now, maybe it will happen, maybe not. But, this would be something really nice. Can we provide like an agent-based modeling consultancy services that would Liquity, but not just Liquity, any immutable project. So, like really addressing those intermediary steps that people don't even realize are required to build very good immutable projects.
But I think it's not the best example. I think so to make it really concrete, where, as I understood it, the association would help, or the DeFi Collective is, with partnerships, how you go kind of about your ecosystem, how do you bootstrap liquidity, and maybe help the projects at the beginning and get something back, so that kind of the next one can benefit from that, from the ones that have grown. So this helping hand, especially in these two areas, also kind of self-regulation is a topic. How can we be more kind of a poster child and take care of kind of the issues we have and be a bit more proactive, so people understand that this really decentralized protocol are a different thing, and we also want to protect users, but can do that in a different way. So I think these are three main topics: the partnership, liquidity, and also this self-regulation part that concretely you will have expertise and you will drive it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Good.
Well, thank you guys for all the time. Thanks for joining us
Thanks
and
for having
taking
us.
some time out of your week here in Paris at ECC. Super appreciate the explanation. I feel like I understand Liquity so much better now.
You can become now part of the team.
It's great. It's great.
We send you to
Just
the next
onboarded
interview
you.
now.
So great to have you guys.
Maybe
Thanks
it's
for
great.
coming.
Thanks a lot.
meeting you.
All right. Ciao.
Ciao.